Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, Internet. I'm excited to tell you Legacy has grown. In the 4.5 years we've been doing this, we are now at the stage where people who were actually involved at almost the same operation or sometimes the same operation, they actually would see a video on Legacy and they thought, man, I was there. I was actually one of the guys who was there. I know what happened there. And here we have something similar like this, and this is fantastic. This is great. And yes, there's a book written about this too, and we will ask the author about it. And he will give us the links, and I'll put it in the description. And damn well, yes, we expect you to go and buy the book and read it further, because you cannot in an hour and a half, 2 hours, even more episodes, is not the same as reading the book. There's a lot more details in a book. But welcome here, Steve Henry, Ratel man. I suppose 6-1 Mech must be one of those units.
Hi, Chris. Chris, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Actually, 6-2 Mech, I think they called it, because we were Forsyth. Yeah, and that's where we were.
Man, I'm happy about this. Now I'm doubly happy because we had, I think, 6-3 Mech on the fight there against, right at the 9 Days War. We had a lot of 6-1 Mech, and now we got the first 6-2. Now I'm very happy. So let me ask you, how did you end up there? Tell me what happened? How did Magnus Malan get hold of you?
Well, of course, right in the beginning, obviously, it was, yeah, man, in the 80s. You know, we were kids, living our lives in the 80s as what kids in those days do. We were naughty little shits, if I may put it like that. Our life, as far as we were concerned, was yeah, very carefree. And you know, we were at school. Everything was great. Everything was fun. You know, 80s music was the best ever. And yeah, we would spend our lives chasing chicks because yeah, we weren't very good at it. But that's what we did, eh? Yeah, so I come from East London, a little Dorpy, or I call it a sleepy town, and the Oaks in East London don't really enjoy me saying that. But yeah, its nickname is Slum Town, and a really lekker place to grow up. You know, that was, yeah, our time was spent, any time we had, we would spend it on the beach or out partying and, yeah, as I say, chasing chicks. So I was at school at Selborne College, and excellent school. Yeah, I played rugby and, yeah, just generally, yeah, we had a good time in the 80s, you know, and we were naughty little buggers. We caused so much. I think I gave my folks grey hair. You know, I come from a big family, 5 kids, and yeah, we would just cause endless trouble. Myself and my mates, we, you know, pushing them out into the road quietly so we could go off to a jog, and then quietly pushing cars back in at the end of the night, hopefully doing no damage to them and stuff like that. So yeah, we used to just cause trouble. And anyway, then obviously, you know, do all your stuff at school. Our school was big on cadets. We every year at Founders Day, I think it's October, we have what we call the ceremony of the key. Now, we had this big World War I and World War II remembrance statue in the yard, in the schoolyard. And they have this every year. They have the ceremony of the key. It's a big thing. You have 2 marching bands. You have Alpha Company, which is the Guard of Honor, and you know, the cadets. All the whole school sort of pitches out in cadets, and you know, attends the ceremony. It's very good. It's excellent. And yeah, thousands of people pitch up there. You know, we even had it before. We have fly past from the local aviation club, who my dad happened to be one of the founding members of it, the Border Aviation Club. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, life was great, eh? So and then obviously what happens is you end up receiving a brown envelope when you're at school. So yeah, I'm a bit nervous. I open this thing, I check it out. Ooh, one Sai Infantry Battalion in Bloemfontein. Hier kom ons. So yeah, I check this out, and I'm nervous as all hell. You know, obviously everybody's hoping that they're going to get a call up to the Air Force or Navy. But anyway, it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, off we go, and start getting ready for all of this. And yeah, the big day arrives. Snot and trane, all tears and what have you. You know, hugging the girlfriend goodbye on the train station, mommy in tears, daddy looking all stoic and all the rest. And yeah, you're off on this big adventure of your life, which is quite interesting because, you'd never really been off on something like this all on your own. Yeah, we hop on the train, snot and trane, and girlfriend holding on to me out of the window, and I almost dropped her on the train platform, but shame. Yeah, and off we go. This is the big adventure of our lives. You know, the whole thing is that none of us had been on anything like this before. And you used to having your family there as a backup. You know, you could always go and run to someone else for help and what have you. And now you were on your own. So we get put in this train carriage, and you're on your own there. And two or three other oaks come in there. You don't know them from a bar of soap. They're also what they call long-haired tits because they've still got long hair, and we're all a bunch of civvies. And sure, there was not the most pleasant train trip I've ever had, that's for sure. Interesting because the windows were all closed up and what have you, just for security, I suppose. Every time you came to a little town like Queenstown or wherever it was, train would stop, pick up more oaks along the way. And off you'd go. And sure, I tell you, you couldn't really sleep. You were so nervous. Train kept stopping and starting. Yeah, eventually we arrived in Bloemfontein. And much to the screaming and shouting of the corporal, and they called you stuff you'd never ever heard of in your life before. You didn't even know what half the stuff was. It took you a while. And they were quite happy to explain to you what they actually meant by calling you all these names and what have you. Never been screamed at and shouted at as much as that in your life before. So anyway, you trio on. You all get together, and then they tell you to climb onto the back of that SAML. Now, if you've never done anything like this before, really, it's you hop onto the SAML, and it's higher than anything you've ever had to climb on before, and you go, yes, like, do I have to get onto this thing? So anyway, you're in there, and it's like a jamming sardines into a blooming can of sardines, and then you go for your first, what they call a roof ride, because the driver decides this is a good idea to go over every blooming pavement, every donga, every ditch, every anything you can do to bounce you around. You know what I call in my book, this precious cargo that these oaks would try and damage as much as possible. Geez, you got bounced around there like second to none, and that's before even getting to one side. Anyway, you then get to Tempe, which is the big army base of which one side is part of. Parabats, SSB, all of those oaks are also in separate camps there. But anyway, so we stop off at one side, and you climb out and you get scaled at and shouted at, and off you go to your, they get you together and go to bungalows and stuff like this. Anyway, look, I'm not going to bore you with all the everything about basics, but I think 101 oaks have really spoken about this. But sheesh, I tell you, you get no rest. You are up, probably 22 out of 24 hours a day. You are running, you are doing everything. I tell you, it was harsh. I still remember the time that you treeing on, or you arriving for, I think it was lunch, and it was about 4 oaks decided now they were going to push in the front of the queue. So the RSM, Regimental Sergeant Major, checked this and he says, you Oaks, come here. You want to act like Varka? We're gonna, and they got an opvolk like you cannot believe. These Oaks had to tree on in front of the whole parade and drink as much water as possible. But they also had to go to, so what they did was you had these eggs and bread and stuff in these big pans that they used to cook up. And they used to line the bottom of these pans with bread to soak up all the oil and whatever. And these guys had to eat all this first, and then they had to drink a lot of water. And then they got an oppie on the parade ground. Well, man, that was unpleasant until they had to throw up everything that they did eat. Anyway, you know, we got it harsh, and I don't think I've ever been that fit in my life. You know, you run, you crawl, you do all types of things, and it's amazing, you know. Anyway, you go through all that harshness of basics, and then eventually they give you your new wife, which is your R4 assault rifle. Man, we're all excited about getting this. But we also didn't realize that, yes, you had to look after this thing like it was your wife. And you had to take us wherever you went. It had to be with you. It had to be spotlessly clean. I remember throwing on assembling outside the barracks in the morning. And your corporal would come along, and he would... you know, even if that barrel was as shiny as anything, he would put his thumb up against, put his thumb up against the barrel, look down it, and he would find things. It was amazing what could actually get into your barrel. There was a Ratel in there the one day. There was a Gary. There was, I think there was even there might have been an Olifant tank in there. How the hell that got into my rifle barrel, I don't know. But we paid for it. Yeah, those inspections were something else. We would, you know, I talk about in the book, I talk about having a canoe as a bed. Your bed had been slept on, it was this whole metal frame and had been slept on by about a few thousand guys before you. And this thing was bent and buckled. And the only way to square off your bed properly was take clothesline pegs and stick them up underneath them and jack this thing up, so it was actually, instead of being hollow like a canoe, it was actually flat. And needless to say, you'd sleep on the floor, on the cold floor in Bloemfontein is not too lekker, but you would not sleep on that bed. It was for your inspection the next day. And you know, I remember sitting there, standing to attention for our inspection, and a vlieg, flies in and lands on, I think it was on top of my cuss or something like this. And that was an excuse for us all to have failed an inspection. And there you went for an oppie again. Yes. And you ran off and you found that, you know, they sent you off to find the leaf on that tree. And you always came back and it was always the wrong leaf. It wasn't the right leaf and you'd have to run again. Anyway, yeah, that was basics. Basics was hectic. But yeah, we did all our stuff, and I remember the one day we were marching along one of the roads on one side, and it was licksocks, oinks. We were marching to our corporal shouting the odds, and yes, we heard this noise coming up behind us. It was like this whistling, rumbling noise. I turned around, and here comes a Ratel. Man, I looked at this thing, and I just thought, wow. Now, this is a proper vehicle. Yeah, we'd seen them before, but this was close up. The corporal scaled us out and told us to get off the road. We aren't good enough to be on the same road as that vehicle, etc., etc. And he also told us that one day, you know, if we're good enough, you know, we will be able to ride in that vehicle. I tell you, what a beautiful piece of machinery. Anyway, yeah, as the years went on, I got to love that machine. I called it my metal mother. Because, that thing protected me like second to none. Anyway, went through basics, then got called to ML4 or MLW, Mechanized Leader Wing. That's on the hill just above Tempe. Used to be inhabited by a bunch of young ladies called the Tempe Tigers. Now, everybody's heard the story about Tempe tigers and people's equipment getting locked to fences and stuff like that. But no, shame. These girls, they were, they'd had trouble in their lives. It wasn't as though they were bad people, I don't think. Anyway, we lived in the barracks that they had there. And I can tell you something, if I thought that basics was tough, nothing on ML4, nothing on MLW. You didn't walk anywhere, you ran, I tell you, as I say, I thought I was fit, but geez, I couldn't believe how hectic that was. No, they kept us running. I mean, we did everything. So, but it was good. You know, they taught us everything about the Ratel. There was, from maintenance to signals to how the radios worked, and obviously the guns and the gunnery and all of that type of stuff. And then we went out to Debrief, which is the training area outside. It's Generaal de Wet training area outside Bloem. And that was exciting, because then you got to actually play with the toys they gave you, your R4, M26 hand grenades, all of this type of stuff, and you get taught how to use the stuff. That's one thing for sure, is that the weaponry that they gave us and all that type of stuff. Sure, we got exceptionally good training on it. And certainly taught us how to use that stuff and how to shoot with and be incredibly accurate with it and what have you. I remember going to Hamilton shooting range. That was the big shooting range in Bloem, and how they taught you how to shoot your R4. There's one thing about South African boys, is that it's almost a natural thing that comes to us, and that's shooting. Every kid somewhere in their life had either had a 2.2 or a BB gun, pellet gun, that type of thing. And they've been out shooting birds and, out on the farm doing things. So that's always, and we I think naturally good shots. I think if I remember correctly, in the Boer War, the Brits had a bit of a problem with that, because the Boer suddenly decided that they could shoot, and they could shoot straight. Very impressive. Yeah, so we headed out to Generaal de Wet training area outside of Bloem. And I just remember it being incredibly cold there, and it was tough. We went for weeks without, when we were on our bush phase, weeks without showering or bathing or anything like that, and back smelling like trolls, I think. And I remember coming back after how many weeks out in the bush without having a shower and what have you, and we got back to the bungalow. And the one oak was so tired, he just collapsed on his bed. Now, what happens is, if you're wearing the same overall and the same browns for weeks on end without showering or washing them, what happens is, apart from the thing, you smell incredibly bad, and everybody stinks and smells the same. Your uniform ends up with this. It's like your body fats and what have you get into the uniform, and it turns this dark brown, black color. So one of his mates decided, it was quite funny. So the rest of us were in the showers and what have you. This I could fall asleep on his bed. His mate walks past him with a cigarette lighter, and just flicks it next to him, and his whole back just set alight. It was insane. The poor bugger woke up and was like screaming. He was on fire. Yeah, the stuff that happened there was quite something. Yeah. Anyway, up at MLW, it was quite interesting, because you're on top of this hill, pine trees and all the rest, and you'd stand guard, and they always reckoned that there were ghosts there. They decided that one of the girls had taken her life, her own life, committed suicide, and the guys swore that in the middle of the night they'd be standing guard, and this girl would come walking up to them and have a conversation with them. It was quite scary stuff. anyway, we would always, stand guard in twos and what have you, and make sure that you didn't creep up on us. So the next thing that was exciting or whatever that happened was they took us for driving lessons on the Ratels. Now, that was great fun because just outside Brim, they get you into a Ratel, and the first time you've ever hopped into a machine that big, I mean, that's unloaded as 18 tons, loaded with all weaponry and mines and, all equipment and whatever is 20 tons or just over 20 tons. It's a big 6x6 deflock vehicle. You sit in the driver's compartment, you sit in the middle, and you've got about at least half a meter to a meter either side of you, and you've got to learn how to drive this thing. It's automatic, so it's and what a lovely vehicle to drive. I tell you, if you ever want an experience, you hop into one of those things and drive it. It drives over everything or through everything, anything. If there's a tree in the way, you just drive into that tree and the tree disappears. You just drive over the top of it. It is unreal. I think you climb through trenches up the other side quite easily. But the funniest thing is that day number one, you heading out of Bloem, and they send you along, I think it's called Dan Pinaar. It's one of the main drives in Bloemfontein, with a whole bunch of traffic circles in it, and driving along there with these massive vehicles, and over the sloping front of the armor and the nose of the Ratel, which is shaped like the front of maybe an arrow or a spear, is this big learner sign hanging down there. I remember going into a traffic circle, and the Ratel in front of me had just gone into the circle, and some oakie in his little, I think it was a Datsun Bakkie or something like that, hopped in between that Ratel and myself, and I came in behind him. Yes, this ape looked in his rearview mirror, saw this big L sign, and decided the best way is getting out of this thing. He jumped over the pavement and got out of the way, which is probably a good thing, because I was worried I was going to ride right over him. And that vehicle would drive over a civilian car without you barely even feel the bump. So impressive. Anyway, so one of our other memorable times at MLW was going down. We had a sokkie organized with the ladies. I think it was the nursing fraternity in Koos. And anyway, so we head down there. Now, we were all excited about this because we hadn't seen enough of girls, as you can imagine. And so we all polish our boots and get all spiff and what have you. And the funniest thing is we get to the hall, and they say, okay, you can't sock with your boots on. So everybody takes off their boots. Now there's a few hundred pairs of boots lying down the side of the hall, and we get into this, and the English guys, not very good at socking, So we were like, we were in our own little call it a lager in the center of the dance floor, and the Afrikaans actually were swooping their girls around with the in sokkie style, and we just did our boring old dancing in the middle. But the funniest thing was, like, right at the end of the sokkie, Sergeant Major decided it was time to three on. Everybody better get their A's into G and get back onto the vehicle. Now the problem was, there's 100 or so pairs of boots lining down the side of the hall, and no one knew whose was whose. So the funniest thing was, everybody just grabbed boots, tried to squeeze them on, whatever. He just ran to the sawmills and jumped on. Well, it took us about a day or two to try and find whose boots were whose at the end of the day. It was hilarious. Yeah, there were some really good stories. Some of the times when we had to go into church. Meanwhile, we didn't actually go into church. We jumped the church parade and ended up at the Spur Steak Ranch in Bloemfontein. That place was always packed to the rafters. And how that manager just managed to make sure that everybody had actually paid for their blooming steak and chips, it was something else. We had great fun. And then obviously, as you go along MLW, We ended up doing frostbite. So it was 120 kilometers in 3 days. Man, I write in the book about the, how extreme it was, how tough it was. It's, your helmet, your body, all your kit goes with you. You're carrying your rifle, you're carrying, oh geez, I tell you. And they give you extra stuff. There's always a tire, and there's that Ratel tow bar you got to carry with you, and what have you. Really hectic stuff. Anyway, 3 days of hell, and eventually got through that. Geez, I don't know how, but made it to the end. And by the time you finish that, you think you really think you're walking on water. What I forgot was just to add in that. It was crazy. It was torture. 3 days of it to get to the end. And anyway, so what happened now is that I thought that I'd made it. I thought the rank was coming my way and what have you. And then we were told that, they had too many people and they had to thin it out. So, sadly enough for myself, I get kicked off and I get sent back down to one side. Man, what a disappointment. I was not happy with life. Anyway, get down to one side and they have to ship us off to the guys on one side had already been split up and sent to 61 Mech at Umatia. Places like that, that is up on the border, well, just below the border in Southwest Africa at that stage. We got sent out to Forsyth. Forsyth is Middelburg in the old Transvaal. Now, what would, I don't know how many people actually realize, but there were effectively two mechanized fists at that stage that I know of. The one was 61 Mech, which is obviously well-known, very famous Italian, and they were based in Umatia, which is in the western side, which is just below Southwest Africa, and we were Middelburg, which is in the eastern side below Mozambique. And so anyway, went out there, and then a lot of training went on, and they sent us to Luatla, Army Battle School in Luatla, which I thoroughly enjoyed. That was great fun. Hell, I tell you, we ended up, testing our vehicles to the max, testing ourselves to the max, and just bonding as a platoon. Alpha Company, Platoon 2, that's who I was with. And hell, I tell you, it didn't take long for us to start bonding as a bunch of brothers. We were really, really good. And hey, man, you would, I ended up being, I became the gunner of Ratel 1-2. Now, Ratel 1-2 is the command Ratel of our platoon. So, platoon would be about 30 plus guys, and it would be made up of 4 Ratels. So you'd have 1-2 Alpha, 1-2 Bravo, 1-2 Charlie, and those were 20 mil Ratels with a 20 mil cannon, dual feed 20 mil cannons. And then you'd have 1-2, which was came up directly behind 1-2 Bravo, and there was a 60 mil mortar. So it was a mortar that pretty much you could fire it horizontally. Which you didn't often do, but you would, fire it like a normal mortar out of the turret. And that was actually mounted with a 7.62 Browning, the old World War II Browning machine gun, and the little brother of the what are the Yanks called it, the 0.5 or whatever it is, I'm not sure, but the bigger brother was the 12.7. I love that weapon. We really got good at it. I mean, geez, I could, first shot, I would, out in the veld in Luatla, I'd be able to take out a hut or whatever it was, an old ruin or a target. First or second shot would plonk that 60 mil mortar on it first time, every time. It was great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And obviously with the Browning, we would just fire off thousands and thousands of rounds a day. It was crazy. You'd end up with on the end of the barrel. That thing would take hours to clean because it was just, oh man, just so many, but it was good fun. It was good fun firing stuff as we were kids, youngsters, teenagers. Yeah, great fun. So anyway, after we finished at Ratel, we came back to Forsyth. Then they sent us up for our first border camp. So we were heading to the Southwest Africa, Angola border. And we went up and opted into a Flossie, which is a C-130 Hercules. And yeah, surprise, surprise. You know, you fly all that way. And as as you come over on Ndangwa, suddenly they do this spiral drop, and you aren't expecting it. Obviously, the Air Force pilots think this is hilarious because every time they get the new guys going in there, the roofs, as they used to call us, the scabs, they would drop from whatever height they were flying at there and circle down to this runway, almost just dropping from the sky. Geez, I tell you, if you had breakfast, your breakfast would stick on the roof, because you were just, well, it was a shock of night. Look, there was a reason for doing that, because apparently some bugger with a death wish had apparently fired a RPG trying to take down a Flossie coming into land at Ndangwa. What would happen was they would send up the choppers, the Alouettes, with a 20 mil cannon on them, and they would circle the runway before the Flossie came down to land. But I tell you, there's one thing: when you land on that runway, the tailgate of that Flossie opens, and sure, number one, the bright light, and number two, that wave of heat hits you like a brick wall. You cannot believe how hot it is. Yeah. Anyway, so you just your first thing is trying to breathe, and you get out of there and just try to find yourself a bit of shade. It is incredibly hot. They send you down to Oshivelo, down to the gate, and there we got trained, or retrained, shall I say, as infantry, proper infantry soldiers, because we had been training as mechanized, which is you're climbing out of Ratels and you're integrating with tanks and stuff like that. But yeah, they didn't really know what to do with us. So yeah, we were up on the border and we were doing a la Botwood, as we would say in those days. And yeah, it was quite interesting. I remember going into an ambush position practicing, and the guy in front of me almost stepped on this fat puff adder. And I looked at this and I looked down and I thought, yo, am I going to shoot this thing? And I thought, no, don't shoot it. Step around it. And I just remember looking at the guy behind me and thinking, I'll walk around this thing. It was a monster. But anyway, we had great fun. We learned to enjoy Windhoek Brewery's brew. Excellent stuff, really good beer. And anyway, so they shipped us there from up there. Oh yes, there was a pet vulture at Oshivelo, and this pet vulture became a good friend with a mate of ours, Huckle. Huckle was this big Afrikaans guy who stuttered, and and needless to say, his nickname was Huckle. But guys used to take the piss out of Huckle, but you had to be ready to run very quickly, because he's a big oak and he used to blocksome you if he caught you. Anyway, Huckle had this pet vulture which would flap down and just come and say, how's it to us? And it was tame and would eat our dog biscuits from our rat packs and stuff like this, which we were only too happy to give to them, because at least somebody enjoyed that stuff. Anyway, one day our Huckle was washing off one of the Garys or one of the buffles or something like that in the wash bay, and the vulture comes, lands down the water, and then flies off up to the power line, sits on the power line, zap, falls down dead. Poor thing was electrocuted. Huckle was not happy with life. Yes. Anyway. Yeah, so then we packed up our stuff and went up to Italy. Now, Italy base is sector 10, if I'm correct. And we started, got ourselves settled in there. We were sharing the base with 101. And there was also a company of parabats there, which is quite interesting, because I remember one of the 101 guys pushing in when it came to the to meal times as well. And the one huge bat told him, hey, get to the back of the queue, and the guy wouldn't listen. He walked up to him and just planted one hell of a punch in this oak, knocked him out. They had to call the medics to drag this oak away. Once again, no one jumped the queue at, at meal times. Yeah, it was quite exciting because we got ourselves set up out for 8-day patrols. Now, you learn very quickly to carry not excess weight and make sure that obviously you do the jump up and down continually to make sure that nothing rattles, nothing makes unnecessary noise and what have you. And yeah, you go for these 8-day patrols, which, you know, initially as you go walking out in these patrols, you're almost pooping yourself because you are so scared that somebody's going to shoot you or something like this, that you are sweating and you're nervous and you are checking out every bush. After a while, it gets a bit boring, you know, and after 2 or 3 days, you get very slack. And anyway, we go off there, and I just, yeah, later in our time at Italia, I remember this one 8-day patrol, myself and my mate Moddy. We were sitting at one of these, at a shauna, which is a kind of a small dam of water. And we looked at this, and I reckon, hey, yes, we're running out of water, Monty. Can I get you some water? So he says, yeah, lekker, go fill up the water bottles. We had these big square, almost 2-liter water bottles on us. So I take him down to the thing, and I look at the water, and the water looks, yeah, it's got this kind of greenish color to it. So okay, it doesn't look too bad. So I start scooping this water off the top. We were used to drinking really shit water, and the stuff was pretty foul. But anyway, I scooped it off the top, and I thought this was fine. As we sit back in the shade there, drinking water, and next thing we hear this clank, 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 and one of the locals come along with his goats. Now, Wambo goats and me are not best mates. I think they're evil things. Yes, they come along, and they climb into the water, and they shit, and they piss, and they bonk, and they do all terrible things in the water. And suddenly I realized that the water we've been drinking has been, that happens every morning. Those goats go in there and they shit and they crap in it, and we're drinking the stuff. Well, what I can say is the next day we got back to base. I just sat down, and we just had a meal, and we were like a restaurant and all the rest. Next thing, everything erupted. I tell you, everything turned brown. I was throwing up, and I was shitting myself, and everything all at once. And it wasn't just me. Then the whole platoon, everybody was. It was crazy. And just to make matters worse, the water in the base had been switched off or wasn't working properly. And yeah, it was an absolute nightmare. So half the base down with jippo guts, and it was terrible. Anyway, so yeah, we had plenty of fun, you know, cooker shops and what have you. We almost had our first contact. We'd been doing a patrol, and yeah, Mwangu was the local drink there, and we tucked into some of that. Next thing, we carry on with our afternoon patrol, and a gunshot goes off. So we all dive down. We reckon what's going on. Start firing a few shots. One of the Oaks, PF Botwood, which I'll talk about a bit later, he shot off a blooming 60mm mortar, Patmore, because he thought we were being attacked and what have you. Meanwhile, it was actually a wedding ceremony that was happening just on the other side. And this one old chap had this old shotgun type thing which he'd loosed off a shot. Man, that almost ended up being really ugly. Anyway, so yeah, a few months up there, did all our stuff and what have you, and then ended up being flown back to eventually come back, flown back to South Africa, back to the States. Ended up back in Forsyth, and then if I remember correctly, did another Luatla stint again, you know, honing up battle skills and what have you. Then it was August, September 1987. They sent us back to the border because once again they didn't know what to do with us, and we ended up going. I think we started off at Oshivelo again, and then got sent up to a place called Minefield. Now Minefield is this tiny little base, and it was manned by, I think it was Sixai, the guys from Grahamstown. Anyway, it was quite interesting because I bumped into a mate of mine who I haven't seen for years, you know, from East London. Anyway, yeah, so we got all our stuff together. The base commandant, he was quite happy that he had guys there who had a lot of experience. And we were Oman at this stage. We were in our second year, almost finished our second year, and we were ready to go. So anyway, off on I think it was our first 8-day patrol. And yeah, we were, usual story, getting bored of catching donkeys and having donkey races, getting gooid into Hackensteek bushes and all of this type of stuff. And as about our third or fourth day out, we get this call over the radio to Luti, we need to come back. Now, what had happened was that because this commandant was quite chuffed that he got this whole battalion of experienced oaks from Forsyth coming in, and that he'd sent his buffels off to Ndangwa, I think it was, to go and stock up on meat and beer for the whole month, which was great. And 4 days out on this patrol, we got called back. So we're going like, what the hell's going on? Hey, hopefully we're going to clear out early, and all of this type of stuff. And that's what we were hoping. We get back in the base, and he says, you guys have been called back to Forsyth. And we didn't know why. They wouldn't tell us why. But he says, got all this meat and all this beer here. You guys are going to have to help me out. We're going to have a hell of a party. And geez, did we party that night? It was scary. I remember sitting on on top of the skitwal, which is not the greatest thing to do, especially when there's a possibility of Swapo creeping up on you and taking a few pot shots at you. We were sitting on top of the skitwal playing da-di-da, da-di-da, da-di-da-di, da-di-da, with these beers, and you got motherless, and the poor oaks from 6 I had to man the bunkers. Anyway, we were hauled back to the States, back to South Africa. Flew back, got back to Forsyth, and then we kind of had an idea that something was on the offing. Something was about to happen, and I remember we got back there, and we started getting issued kit like you haven't seen before. Every Ratel was given frontline ammunition, like, as I say, like we'd not even used in Ratel before. And there were just magazines and magazines and magazines, but mags that brand spanking new, just M26 grenades, FOSS grenades, you name it. You had a lot of everything. And I suppose the cherry was on the top was when each Ratel got these big anti-tank mines that we put the right hand flap below the door. And the moment we saw this thing, we reckoned, no way, we are going up north. And the first time we'd been in a canteen eating proper food for probably I don't know, for the last 6 months or something like this, because we'd been surviving on rat packs for probably for our second year so far. You walked into the canteen and they had news clippings up that Fapla was again trying to take over Mavinga, was pushing down towards Jamba in southern Angola. So them, with the help of the Cubans and the Russians, they'd tried it the year before, and with the help of our artillery and some of our special forces and what have you, they managed to stop the attack. Then the Russians and the Cubans and the Angolans decided to do it again. And things were getting tight. And what had happened was 6-1 Mech had been called up, and they with all their artillery and stuff that was going with him, the G5s were doing a great job. MRLs, multiple rocket launchers were up there. There were numerous artillery troops, and them together with 6-1 Mech took on the I can't remember if it was 59 Brigade. I can't remember which one it was, and absolutely decimated them in the Battle on the Lomba. And it was unreal. It was like I write in my book, like little David giving Goliath a snot clap of a note, because they literally took that Cuban brigade. Now, a brigade's about what, I don't know, I'm guessing about 4 or 5 times bigger than one of our, than one of our battalions. And it was quite something. They totally decimated them, shot them out big time in the Battle of Lomba. Anyway, so we start heading up. We drive up to Ratel, did some more training integrated with the tanks and with artillery, with once again with more G5s, I suppose, and honing our skills, because we knew that the pawpaw was about to hit the fan. Then we started the long drive up to southwest to the border of what is now known as Namibia, and so I had a Ratel driver's license. I was sharing the driving with my driver van Biljon, which I call the most unflappable, most chilled guy I've ever met in my life. I tell you, that I saw stuff and and was just as chilled and as unflappable as possible. Anyway, I remember driving into late during the night, driving. I think there's a pass as you come in down towards Windhoek direction, and driving on this pass. And what happens is the Ratel at this stage was fully loaded, so it was 20-ton plus. And a Ratel is very susceptible to getting what you call a speed roll, where it starts swinging to the right, and then you try and correct it, and you overcorrect it, and it swings to the left again. It has this, because it's so heavy. Yes, I remember almost shitting myself because this thing, came close to flipping it. And that's happened quite a few times before with Ratels. And anyway, long drive up. I remember waking up the next day. We were under our camouflage jet, waking up the next day thinking, the sun's bright. Finding ourselves in the middle of the southern Southwest African desert with nothing in sight. It was just sand. We were really in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, drove up, and I remember at a stage along the road, we had all stopped. This whole battle group had stopped. We were spread out all the way down the road. As far as you could see, there were Ratels and and logistic vehicles, Quairfuls, Buffels, you name it, stretched down the road. And we were all sitting there chilling, trying to keep cool. The tar was melting. It was taking a hammering, this little road, taking a hammering from the weight of this battle group. Anyway, we were sitting in the shade there. Next thing, over the radio, Van Biljon comes, "Hey guys, check down the road, check what's coming your way." So we all climb onto the Ratels, have a look down the road, and here we come, the mother of all vehicles, G6s. This thing was like a Ratel on steroids. It was the biggest mother I've ever seen in my life. A magnificent piece of vehicle. So what it was G5, which is the famous artillery piece, the best in the world at that stage, which probably Littleton Engineering, I'm not sure who were the guys who put it together, but they put it on a massive extended, it looked like as I say, a Ratel on steroids. It was enormous. So this was a self-propelled G6 155mm cannon. Absolutely amazing. The great thing about this thing is that up in Angola, you could shoot and scoot a hell of a lot quicker. So they would do a fire mission. As soon as they were finished, they could get out of there quickly before the MiGs came and try to find them again. Absolutely amazing piece of equipment. Anyway, so they came past. We were all excited, and we pull into Grootfontein. Now, Grootfontein's a massive marshalling area. There were just vehicles as far as the eye could see. Ratels, just hundreds of them. It was amazing. And this whole battle group plus was all spread out there, plus everything you could think of. And we were parked next to the runway. And I remember sitting on top of the Ratel, watching these mirages taking off. And you realize why they call these guys vlamgatte. fiery arseholes, if you want to call it that, because these guys lit up the afterburners and they would take off. But they need to really go for it because they were so heavily laden with bombs and missiles and stuff like this. And these oaks were taking off and heading straight up north. And you're sitting there going like, sure, this looks like a serious stuff happening up north. And it was a big wake-up call to us because suddenly you realized that shit was getting real, They had a massive potjie course for us that night. And I don't know if it was real beef or it was those damn Wambo goats again, but whichever way it tasted good. And I always thought to myself, shit, is this going to be our last supper? Yeah, scary thought. That night we went up to Rundu, I think it was, and we crossed over there in the middle of the night, and headed up north, and got to, I think it's the Kavango River, and that's where they had the bridge built, and we went over into Angola. And that was the easiest crossing. There was no border control, nothing. We just drove across, and that was it. It's a massive battle group driving through there. I'm not quite sure why we had to do it at night because, I'm sure by that stage, anyone who wanted to know knew that there was this huge battle group going across. Next morning, we drove past a little deserted town. And I remember these slogans, Viva Fala or Viva Fapla, painted on the walls and stuff like this, and driving through there. And we were about to dismount, and I looked down on the ground there, and all you saw were these anti-personnel mines lying all over the show. Now, these things had probably been sown, I don't know, down there years ago. But over the years, when there is rain and what have you, it washed them all out. So these mines were sticking up all over the show. And everyone was told, do not dismount, sit where you are. And needless to say, as boys would be boys, everybody climbs up onto the top of the Ratel and tries to have a leak or have a piss on the mines, I always just thought of this, writing home to someone's mother saying, dear Mrs. So-and-so, it's sad to tell you the news, but your son is only half the man he used to be because he lost his equipment. Anyway, the next few days spent driving through Angola north to Mavinga. Amazing. What it was there was no road. It was just dirt tracks. It was a dirt track where all these vehicles had driven before us, and they had dug out such an enormous track that effectively you could put your wheels into that, and you barely had to steer. This thing would just you'd drive yourself. And I remember driving along at the stage, and 1-2 Alpha was in front. I think Bravo was behind them, then followed by us, 1-2, and then followed by 1-2 Charlie. And Corporal Delamere, 1-2 Alpha, calls over the radio, hey, Luty, check, there's a skelly sitting on the left here. And sure as hell, we looked out, so everyone's looking for the skeleton. And someone's sense of humor, they'd left him dressed in his Fapla uniform, and put one of those Russian metal helmets on his head, and his arm was kind of pointing the way to Mavinga. Yeah, it was a bit of a obscene road sign, I must admit. And I can imagine the logistics drivers coming up from Mavinga afterwards, being told, hey, just look for Fred the Fapla sitting on the side of the road there, pointing the way. As soon as you see him, you just keep going. It's another 40, 50 Ks, and you get to Mavinga. Yeah, anyway, interesting. We arrived at Mavinga and set ourselves up there. And then, I spent the next few days, if not weeks, driving around in the bush from one place to the next. And we carried on just, as I say, moving from one place to the next. Now, obviously, we'd been warned about MiGs. And every time every time we had to stop somewhere, we would pull into what we'd call visgraat or fishbone, where one ratel would pull left, one ratel would pull right, and what have you. And you drive into each vehicle would look for the nearest tree, and there were lots of trees. Shit, that place was the vegetation was like going into forests at times. And you pull up to this tree and out with your camo net. We got so good. We'd been practicing this at Ratel. We'd got so good with our camouflage that we would camouflage at Ratel in 30 seconds flat. You know, it would be, you wouldn't see it from the air at all. You wouldn't see this vehicle from the air at all. MiGs would not see it. You just looked like another piece of vegetation down there. You know, we were that good. And we'd spend the next few weeks practicing vuur en beweging, that's fire and movement, which was completely different from doing it at Luatla. Where Luatla, you could run in a straight line. Maybe you'd have a Hackenstedt bush in front of you, and you'd have to try and get over that or try and get around it without your mate who was covering you shooting you in the arse. The problem in Angola was that there were so many trees around. You had to learn how to get around this without, as I say, being shot in the back or shot in the arse by your mate who was coming up behind you. It was completely different. We practiced what they call jungle lane, where they pop up targets. You're in the really thick bush. Pop up targets will pop up left, right, and center of you. I loved that. It was great fun. You'd your R4, your weapon, became pretty much part of you. You wouldn't even look through the sights. You just blat that target left, right, and center. Anyway, so yeah, we started moving up. You know, practice as much as we could in that thick bush. It was incredibly thick. We then started driving towards. We were closing on 16 Brigade. That's 16 Brigade. I remember on the Sunday, I think it was the 8th of October, Germany called us together and said, guys, tomorrow, you know, you're going into what's probably going to be a big battle. And it's time to pray for your souls, you know, which is a pretty scary thing. You know, we think we're invincible, you know, and we thought, shit, I thought to myself, bloody hell, I'm too young to die. I'm not going to die tomorrow. Come on, don't be silly, you know, this type of thing. Scary. I remember that night. So we're all in this battle group lager, and you hear the odd clink of metal on metal, and the guys are prepping the vehicles, prepping the guns, prepping the ammunition and what have you for the following morning, what that might bring. And I remember Corporal Debrief from 1-2 Bravo. He was in charge of 1-2 Bravo, the Ratel, and he came walking back towards us with this rather sickly look on his face. He wasn't happy. Something was bugging him, and he climbed up onto our Ratel. He was chatting to my lieutenant and myself. He says, something's not lucky. He doesn't think he's going to make it the next day. And anyway, Debrief had just been married like a month beforehand. I mean, it was crazy. We were all youngsters, and for him to be married, it was quite something, you know. And he had his wife's name on his wear belt. He had written on his wear belt, and he was so chuffed with that. Yeah, he wasn't happy with his lot. He decided he wasn't going to make it the next day. Something was going to go wrong. And this was weird because, you know, the rest of us were kind of, we didn't know what to be scared of because we hadn't been through this before in our lives. Obviously, not many people have been. And so anyway, we got our stuff together, and we started driving through the night. I remember coming across a massive open shore. It was kind of a floodplain, which you find in Angola with these huge rivers, these long rivers winding down through very flat plains, and it was absolutely magnificent. I remember the moon being out, and we were driving around the edge of this big floodplain, and thinking how beautiful it was. And then you know, obviously we go back into the forest, back into the trees and what have you. Driving through all night. I mean, yes, you know, all that driving in that Angolan bush, I got so used to it. I would stop in my turret next to my looty. My loot is a big oak. He was like well over 6 foot, and he was as tall as he was round. He was a big oak. So I'd be squashed up in my side of the little turret. And but it was amazing. You could sit there over hours and hours banging your head, and you'd have to keep your, I'd be wearing my helmet with my comms on. And that was the lucky thing about being in 1-2, is I would have the comms. So I'd have 2 channels. I'd have the channels coming in between my lieutenant and 1-2 Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and ourselves. And then the other channel was coming in from our Befel, our command rifles, which were in charge of the battle group. So I would hear all the information as it came on. I'd hear a little bit more than what the other guys were hearing, which was great. You got a bigger picture, Anyway, driving through the night, and the morning of I think it was Monday, 9th of November. We're driving through, and I just remember it was slowly but surely becoming lighter. And, I describe it in the book as the colors suddenly start becoming brighter. And the weirdest thing is that day, for the first time, I noticed how green can be. With the sun suddenly starts coming through the trees, and you see it from a different angle. And as it started becoming lighter, we started getting closer to 116 Brigade. We weren't quite sure. The artillery was firing in it. Then we could hear the rumbling going on, and we were getting closer and closer. And we spread out in battle formation. And the battle formation was obviously 1-2 Alpha on the left, Bravo directly in front of us, and 1-2 Charlie Ratel, 1-2 Charlie on the right-hand side. And we were directly, very close to, but directly behind 1-2 Bravo. And we're heading along, nothing's happening. More bush, more, just more bush and what have you, and crashing through the bushes, driving around, and now we're getting nervous because we know something's happening. The tanks weren't right with us. I don't know where they were. They might have been with Bravo Company. I'm not sure, but they were more in the center. Charlie Company was in reserve. So the 2 front companies, if I remember correctly, we were on the front left-hand side. There was Alpha. Bravo was next to us. The command vehicles were behind us with Charlie Company behind them. And we were called, Battle Group Charlie. That's what we were called. 6-1 Mech were called Bravo. And the other guys, I think it was 3-2 and other bits and pieces together were called Alpha. Anyway, so we get closer and closer and closer, and we know we're getting close to 116 Brigade. And next thing we hear this through our mics here, tanks to our left. This shout comes through, and I go, oh my fuck, and I crank a turret to the left, and there's probably, for a change, we could actually see a bit of a distance. I would guess at about between 80 and 90 meters away from us were 3 T-55s sitting there aiming at us. And I thought, oh my fuck, this is where there's a saying, your poepel knijpt vast, your arsehole puckers up. I tell you, it was something else. I've never been so scared in my life. So all we did was, now there's one thing about Ratel. You never stand side on to your enemy. You never stand with your tail facing your enemy, because that's thin armor. There's nothing much, that armor is only going to stop light rounds, but anything heavier than a 7.62 will get through. And now we're facing these 100mm cannons of Russian main battle tanks. It is as scary as all hell. So we're sitting there, what seems like ages. My knuckles, I swear my knuckles were white. I was gripping on the solenoids in those guns, and obviously we couldn't fire yet. And the commands were going over the headset. The tanks were coming, and the tanks were coming, and we were shitting ourselves because the 90s we didn't even have the 90s with us. The 90s we were making their way through. And next thing, what seemed like an hour was probably only a minute or two. The tanks from SSB or School of Armor came roaring down next to us on my right-hand side, because we were on completely open on the left, facing these guys. And the tanks rode down our right-hand side, swung left again, came in between us and the T-55s. And next thing, we all integrated with them, and we were told open fire. My God, I tell you, the noise, the thrill, the insanity of it was absolutely insane. Immediately, Olifants opened fire. It was the first tank on tank battle on African soil, I think, since World War II. It was insane. Almost immediately, these three T-55s exploded, and they were just, the turrets were blown off there. It was mayhem. And the noise coming back towards us. And we advanced through this, and it was amazing. I mean, you're going past burning tanks with burning bodies still in them, and people that are burnt to charcoal. It was absolutely shocking. Yeah, we drove through it with this insane, almost feeling of elation as we just drove straight through them. There were quite a few dead lying around and what have you, burnt bodies and what have you, and we drove through them. A lot of firing, a lot of machine gunning and what have you, and we got through them without losing anyone on our side. Drove straight through them, circled round, came back, picked up there was one, I think he was a lieutenant of a Fapler lieutenant who had been shot through both legs with a Browning. And anyway, so pulled him up. He had a map on him of the 1/6 Brigade's defensive. So what had happened was these guys were trying to escape or trying to move towards one of the other brigades, and they thought that we hadn't seen them, which is absolutely insane. I swear, if you ever believe in a guardian angel or someone looking after you, that was the time, because there's absolutely no reason why those guys didn't fire on us. They would have ripped us apart, and there would have been lots of mothers back in the States mourning their dead sons. It was hectic. Anyway, so we drove through what was burnt out tanks, bodies lying everywhere and what have you. I remember, I think there was a time where one of the Ratels hooked up what was a water tanker, a green water tanker. It was one of Fapler's water tankers, and they drove around with this thing behind them. Anyway, then we formed up again. It took us a while to get through everything, and then we started approaching what we knew were the positions on 1/6 Brigade's defensive positions. As we got closer, so the G5s were firing continually, and as we got closer, we started integrating with somebody's told me that it's been different, but I'm almost certain it wasn't UNITA guys. These were 3-2 battalion guys that were with us, and they went ahead on foot, and they walked past us, and I thought to myself, geez, you are brave bastards walking out there, because we knew they were just ahead of us, and these guys walked out in front of us, and next thing, from kind of the left-hand side from 1-2 Alpha, firing started happening, and this, these guys started pouring fire on us like you can't believe. Suddenly, you hear this smack, smack, this rap ding, as rounds would bounce off the armor, and you'd put your head down and keep your head down. And anyway, we started. It started getting a bit hairy, and then the 3-2 guys started putting back, and we started overtaking them. And I started, firing into the bushes ahead of us. And because, we were told that, these guys were using the trees ahead of them to aim the mortars in on us, and there were mortars dropping all over the show and what have you. Then, we're bouncing up through where mirages had bombed them the previous day or so, coming up through those explosive holes and what have you, and keep on firing. We're having rounds bouncing off. The noise was incredible, and then it tended to slack off a bit. Next thing we hear fearsing lug, which is vyandelike vliegtuie, which means that the MiGs are coming at us. And what had happened was that the firing sort of was slacking off a bit. We were still having the odd round bouncing against us, and 3-2 was pulling back. And it told us at I think it was probably at about our 5 o'clock position, these 2 MiGs came in at us, and they were low. So someone fired up a flare, and everybody just shoots towards the flare, because, the chances of actually hitting these buggers are slim, second to none. These guys were so low that what happened was that we were so close in contact with their 1-6 brigade that we were almost on top of them, and these guys couldn't drop any bombs because they were worried about hitting their own oaks, and they couldn't see where the difference was, literally. I remember seeing this pilot that came down so low that I could see this pilot. He had a white helmet on, looking down at us as he came screaming over us. It was pretty scary, put it mildly. And anyway, so then everybody turned their guns forward, and we carried on crashing through the bush, rounds bouncing off us. And next thing, the troops were told to step out or stop 8. And this was all the troops in 1-2 Alpha Bravo Charlie, and also 1-2 9-1-2. We had the Patmore mortar, the lieutenant with his radio man, and a few riflemen. But each vehicle's got about 10 or 11 riflemen in it, with mag gunners and what have you. Anyway, these guys all stepped out. Now, what happened was the FAPLA were obviously waiting for this to happen, and they started loying us, throwing 82 mortars at us, and these mortars started dropping, and next thing, flash bang, just to the left of 1-2 Bravo, which was probably, as I say, a few meters ahead of us. It's a massive explosion, and right in them amongst our oaks, and there were guys lying. And what had happened was a mortar, 82 mil, had landed between Divanaga and Buddha, and injured about another 4 of the guys. One of them was a good mate of mine, Philip. And also Mark. Yes, it was hectic. So anyway, the Runkels recoveries had to pull up there while we pulled forward. And what had happened was, because 1-2 Bravo was now taken out, me at 1-2, we had to overtake, and I had to pull into the front row, which is pretty scary because I only had a 60 mil mortar and a 7.62 Browning, so I didn't have a 20 mil cannon as a defensive weapon. Anyway, we crashed forward, and then suddenly we started getting the trenches, and we were, bucking up and down through trenches and what have you. And as I remember coming up through one trench, seeing a vehicle dug in front of me, and I let rip with the 7.62 with the Browning, and this vehicle, it was kind of a half-track looking thing, and it had drums of what I presumed was fuel on the back of them. So I I ran my Browning like crazy on this thing, left, right, and center, and thing exploded into flame. And yeah, we drove up and drove past them, and one of my mates, Dion, was infantry on the ground. I said, yes, as he went past there, he said there were 4 guys, poplar oaks, sheltering underneath this thing. And he said, not a nice way to die. Anyway, yeah, we went through this. There was massive fighting going on. The rounds were thick, fast, you can't believe. You know, we had these aerials, these thin metal aerials sticking out of either side of the turret, and that fire was so thick and fast that yes, these aerials were bent. Both aerials, I mean, I checked them afterwards. They'd been hit by you could see the copper from the rounds as they'd hit them. It was crazy. As the guys were stepping out or stopping 8, Maluti decided he was going to climb out the top of the turret. Big mistake, because as that was about to happen, I don't know, it was an RPD or something, drilled us. And tell you that it walked those rounds all up from the driver's window all the way up across the turret, and it shook the living crap out of the turret. And luckily, Luti hadn't decided to try and climb up over the top of the turret, because he would have been drilled. So what I did was I swung the turret to the left, and he managed to climb down the inside of the turret and out through the door, which is the way he should have gone anyway. You know, we laughed about that afterwards, because he would have been past tense. He would have been dead if he had tried to climb over the top of that. Anyway, so then we fought our way through 1/6 Brigade's positions, which was hectic. I mean, that's when our infantry really climbed into them. And yeah, we had 2 Oaks, Jap and Craig. Craig and Jap came from OBS in Cape Town, and these Oaks were tough and rough. And I tell you, the 2 of them, as a tag team going into bunkers and stuff like that, was incredible. There were stages where I remember, I think it was Craig showed me his Browns afterwards. He had shrapnel from his own M26s and phosphor grenades had come through the bottom of his Browns. That's how close they were following on from the grenades that they tossed into bunkers and what have you. And yeah, we made a complete mess of that, of 1/6's defensive positions. But while we were in Ratel, I think it was 2-1 Bravo from Bravo Company, got taken out by a T-55 just outside of 1/6's positions. So everything was just kind of slowed down at that stage, and continual tap of the R4s, you know, the R4s and the mag gunners just doing their work, and it was grisly work. You know, they were just taking out anyone that was still, you know, firing back at them. And as we were clearing up through the position, we were told to stop and to secure the position. And I remember, I think it was Delamere or one of the corporals saying, "Hey, I can see them running away. We've got to chase them," type thing, because 1/6 were evacuating positions and running like hell. And we were told, "No, sorry, can't chase them." And we were the helling, because we would have completely annihilated them. We would have done another what 6-1 had done to, I think it was 5-9 Brigade on the Lomba. We would have completely decimated them. The problem was that you let these guys go, and you have to face them again the day after or the day after that. Anyway, that was it was hectic. I mean, we'd been fighting probably continually, and it's crazy. It all seems like it's happened in a few minutes, but that was continual fighting for at least between 4 and 6 hours. That happened that morning. It was crazy. I tell you, your adrenaline had been operating on adrenaline at a level that I'd obviously never been at in my life before. And sure, I tell you, it takes it out of you. And that once we'd finished, we obviously all then on trek, we pulled it out of that position, and then we logged for the night. And the choppers came in. Obviously, choppers only flew at night to come and pick up the bodies and the wounded and the bodies and the body bags and what have you. And they only flew at night, obviously, because the MiG threat during the day. And anyway, so these guys came in, and it was very somber. It wasn't like, because we had to keep the ex who were still with 1-2 Bravo, the guys who were still alive and what have you, had survived it, keep them close, keep them talking, and just keep their minds off the fact that there's a lost. I think 2 guys were killed and 4 guys were injured or wounded in that attack. Anyway, so I just remember having something to eat, and then eventually we had to change tires on some of the vehicles that had been tires shot out and what have you. And by the time we'd finished that, I just fell into this what I call a black dreamless sleep, which was a good thing, because you don't want to relive what we had just been through, which was crazy. Then those guys got away from us there, and then we had to a day later we had to refuel, we had to resupply ourselves, get more ammo, stock up on ammunition, because I couldn't believe it. I mean, my turret was stocked up with 60mm mortars, but I don't know where they all went to, but they were all fired, and I just can't remember shooting all those mortars. So one thing about the 60mm mortar is that you fire it, and it's obviously pretty sensitive. So with all those trees around, I'd fire it above where I knew that there was opposition was there, the Fopler were there, and it would spray the shrapnel around like crazy thereafter. It had quite a mean kill radius. Anyway, and refill the turret, which was miraculously kind of empty of all 60mm. I'd run through buckets, what do you call them, boxes and boxes of Browning 7.62 ammo. And the crazy thing about it is I just cannot remember. I remember firing, I remember shooting and whatever, but geez, not that much. Yeah, it was insane. It goes through. I think your body, kind of your brain, your mind protects the fact that it can't process everything, and you only remember certain parts of it, which is quite interesting. A mate of mine, I told him the story, or when I wrote the book, he says, "How the hell can you remember in such great detail?" Then again, there's certain things, when stuff like it happens to you, it is totally ingrained in your brain. There's no way till the day I die I will remember, what happened with what happened, followed it, etc., etc. There's crazy stuff going on there. Anyway, so we took the next day to refuel, replenish, get all our stuff together. And I remember sitting there, and yes, we were all joking about and bragging about how many round splashes we had on our vehicles, because it's been well and truly drilled. And then 2 days later, I suppose it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, we set out again, but this time we knew what we were kind of in for. So scary, because you're shitting yourself, because you know what's going to happen. And we started chasing the brigades again, and it's amazing. You get yourself, you set up your turret, you set up your guns, you set up your mortar bombs and what have you, so you know what you want to grab first, how you're gonna use them, etc., etc. You learn very quickly. This day we started off, started heading through usual sort of bushwhacking for hours. The sun came up, we found a very thick wooded area, so we went into that, and I remember parking off there. The Luti went to the command vehicles to go get his final orders, and I was sitting on top of the turret, trying my lovely Rat Pack pop, which was, yeah, I mean, it was edible, but it gets a bit monotonous after having the same thing 6 months in a row. Sitting on top there, where suddenly two of our mirages came screaming over our heads. These oaks must have been barely, I don't know, 20, 30 meters above the ground. It was as scary as all hell. I almost fell off the top of the turret. I dropped my breakfast, and these guys were so low that I could see individual rivets on their wings. They came screaming over above us. Geez, that's one thing I can say is our pilots were at another level. Those oaks were so good. And they came screaming over us, and you lost sight of them because of the trees. And then I could spot them. They popped up again as they did that loop, and they kind of loop up, and then they lob their bombs onto the positions, onto the five positions ahead of us. And you saw this guys, and I thought that I just caught a glimpse of them looping up, and then they hit the deck again and they run for home. And that's one thing about the pilots. I write about it in the book, and I talk about, they reckon that Angola in that stage of the war must have been, okay, apart from probably the Soviet Union itself, but one of the most heavily defended airspaces in the world. It was insane. Another thing too is that we obviously, the further we went north, the more we lost our air superiority. Now, our pilots were great, but as Mirages couldn't outfly the MiG-23s, and those were fast babies. They could fly like crazy. Our pilots were, as far as I'm concerned, way better than the opposition. No two ways about it. And with that, I'm talking about our chopper pilots, C-130 pilots, Bosboks, everything like that. Those guys were they were at another level. They kept that air bridge running into Mavinga for months and months and months without losing a single aeroplane. And they'd come in there, I chat about it in the book, insane dirt strip. And so they went and they flew up. You say after our battles, to get dead and wounded out there in the middle of the night, how the hell they found their way into where we were in flat, featureless jungle. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. Anyway, so Luti comes back, so we saddle up again and off we go in our formation. We're going looking for our next Fapla brigade to attack. And we are heading along, and we hear this fierce nilach. Oh, yeah, here we go again. Okay, now we are already sort of out in a battle formation, and so we reckon, no way. This time we think we're close enough to the enemy, and we're not gonna fist fight. We're not gonna go into trees and do camo and all the rest. And I looked up, and I saw there were about 4 MiGs. And these buggers started circling us. And I thought, whoa, here comes a bit of action. And it is insane. You sit there, you watch these. Two of them dropped, and they started coming down lower and lower and lower. And I was watching them all the time. So my turret's open above me, and I'm sitting here watching them. And these 2 black eggs detached from them as they dropped these bombs. At the last moment, I slammed the hatch closed and just hoped and prayed that it wasn't going to be too close, because those 500-pound bombs, if they impact even close to you, you'll be toast. I mean, that thing would rip a rattle apart second to none. So, geez, I tell you, the ground shook, and it rattled and hummed and like crazy. And I remember once the explosion had gone, I opened up the turret and looked back, and there was this massive cloud of dust and smoke above where this bomb had landed. Yeah, thank goodness the Cuban pilots or the Angolan pilots, whoever dropped that bomb, wasn't that accurate. But
hello everyone, just a short announcement, won't take much of your time. People have been asking me, how can you assist the channel? We've been going on now almost 4 years. We've recorded almost 1,000 videos, and we were fairly successful. We are close to 4 million views. and we are very close to 1 million hours of being watched. So we've done a lot to boost the image of the SADF and the SAP, and we will carry on doing it for as long as possible. But we do need help. We do need you to support us in any way you can. Spread the word, make good comments, give it a thumbs up. And also, if you wish, join the Patreons. That's for $5 a month. Of course, if you want to make it $20 or $50, you're more than welcome. There's about 50 of you who's doing that right now, out of 100,000 a month who come here to look at the videos. And that really assists us because that, in the first place, makes us feel good. And secondly, it pays for our Zoom. And we can also use the money if we go on a field trip or if we need new equipment. That's the one way. The other way is you can support us by buying my books, the books I wrote, or the George M. James books, which are all very, very good books, and it's books which you would be interested in. If you like legacy, you're going to like those books. So we created a brand new channel on YouTube where we discuss only the books, and thus we're leaving the legacy channel alone just to do the military stuff and police stuff and tell stories. I will leave the links for Patreon as well as the new YouTube channel. I'll leave it in for you in the description. Thank you. Let's get back to the video.
Yeah, so these two black eggs detached themselves from the MiGs as they came screaming down. And I just remember the last thing I saw before slamming the hatch closed was tracer rounds from 1-2 Charlie's 20 mil shooting up at the MiGs, trying to distract them. But geez, I slammed that hatch closed, and just hope like hell that those bombs didn't land anywhere close to us, because either a direct hit or anywhere close to us we would have been toast. We would have been toast. There's no two ways about it. You know, I always think to myself, hell, in that situation, if only we had stingers, we would have taught those MiGs a thing or two, because they were a nightmare. They were always on us. Yeah. So anyway, we carried on stalking those Fapler brigades. We moved off again, and I thought to myself, I seem to realize it, but today was the 11th of November. That's the 11th day of the 11th month of the Armistice Day, you know, the day to the day that it was supposed to be the day that ended all wars. Well, that was World War I, and we still at it. People never learn, do they? Never learn. Yeah. Anyway, the guys were organizing their kit. I was stacking my mortar bombs, making sure they were all ready. As we drove along, the oaks were, checking their magazines, making sure that they had enough ammo with them, making sure that the M26 frag grenades were all stacked where they should be, putting them into their webbing and all that. And I remember looking down, and our mortar gunner, Dave, was half sitting, half lying on the jump seat next to the left door, reading a book. Dave was always reading a book. And I often got the feeling that he'd rather be in his book than actually where we were at that moment. And I'm sure he would have been. I suppose a lot of us actually felt the same way. I shouted to him, Dave, put your fucking boots on, because he was sitting there without his boots on. And Dave pretty much turned around to me and said, fuck off, can't you see I'm reading? I think Dave was more worried that he might not finish that book. Anyway, we bashed through the bush a lot, quite a bit longer, and the G5s were screaming overhead, and the rumbling was happening ahead of us. But the bush got thicker as we went along. Half an hour later, we debussed our troops, and they were all walking along next to the Ratels, and it was hot, and guys were nervous. We were all nervous. Every second tree or whatever that looked a bit threatening, the oaks would open fire on. So this whole battle group was spread out in battle formation, and we kept going at it. An hour later, eventually the commanders called a stop to it, and everybody chilled out a bit, and grabbed a bit of our precious water to drink. And I clearly remember taking off my comms, unclipping my comms, taking off my helmet, and leaning over. I was leaning over the side of the turret, chatting to one of the guys who was getting water from the water tank between the two rear wheels. And Corporal Delamere from 1-2 Alpha had climbed up a sort of a low tree in front of us to try and see what he could see ahead, because we knew they were up there, but just couldn't. There was no reaction as of yet. He climbed up this tree, and as he was looking at the tree, suddenly all hell broke loose. The whole of the Fapler Brigade's defensive armament kicked in on him. And you just heard this ping, ping, rattle, bang, as all hell broke loose in this, the quickest dismount you've ever seen from a tree in your life. That tree was shredded in a matter of seconds, RPD rounds, AK-47s, you name it. And I suddenly woke up very quickly when rounds started bouncing off the armor. And I grabbed my helmet, put my helmet back on, clipped up my comms, and dropped my head back into the turret. Dropped down, loaded a 60mm mortar, cranked the larding on top, the nose cone, slammed it into the breech, slammed the breech back, and fired one of those off, and then followed it by a long raking run of the Browning 7.62. Our peaceful lunch break had been shattered very quickly by what was the whole of the Fapler Brigade's blooming defensive fire on us, and they were opening up big time. Order of vuurbelt or vuurgordel actie, which is firebelt action, was sent over the air, and everybody opens up. That's a command to open fire with everything you have. Doesn't matter if you see any target in front of you, just open fire on fully automatic, and all hell broke loose. We fired like crazy. We drove forward, and as these rounds were smacking off the armor, we inched slowly forward, and that Browning was cooking off next to me. I was sitting there, my hand on the solenoid with my head, my face attached to the gun sight, to the SIG block, so I could see. And you couldn't see a hell of a lot in front of you. You could see the tree line and the flashes coming out of the tree line, going crazy. And our troops on the ground were firing off. There were tracers shooting backwards and forwards like you can't believe. It looked like some kind of war movie that you've seen. It was insane. The noise was incredible. Anyway, I just stuck with my head on that SIG block, and that 7.62 Browning next to me was just running like crazy. And what happened was I have a tail gunner who was Corporal Schultz. He climbed through the back passageway and up into the I moved the turret to the side so he could climb into the turret from down below. And he sat next to me, and he started prepping the mortar bombs and helping me with that. We were firing like crazy. The smell of the cordite and the noise was incredible. So we've got one of those little extractor fans. I remember Daniel Botwood talking about his little extractor fan, and this thing was humming along in the background. But I swear it wasn't making much of a difference. It carried on, and it was trying to suck out that cordite, but you could barely breathe because that Browning was running full taps. I just kept on firing these 60mm mortars at the tree line ahead of us. And every time they hit a branch of a tree, they would explode, and a hell of a lot of shrapnel, sending shrapnel around to anything that wasn't protected with armor below it. Rounds were bouncing off us. It was going like crazy. Schultz was holding the body cover of the Browning down next to me. Because what I'd done was, in training and at Debrief, at Luatla, what was happening is that the body cover was a bit tight. So I reckon I got the tiffies to shave off a bit of metal in this thing to make it looser, easier to open. What was happening is this Browning was getting so hot, it was becoming white hot at this stage. The body cover kept on popping open, and when it popped open, it would drop the belt off the side, and suddenly we'd have to reload the belt. Now, Schultz is sitting next to me, and he kept on having to pick up the belt and hold the body cover down, but his hand was burning like hell. Luckily, he found a leather glove that was lying. We had leather gloves in the turret with us. Grabbed a leather glove, held it on the top, and kept the Browning running. Shit, the Browning was running like crazy, and it was just this continual stream of rounds going backwards and forwards. Hell of a noise! Like you cannot believe the noise. It was insane. You could barely hear yourself thinking there. As I say, that little fan that was supposed to be a suction fan, keeping the turret free of all that cordite and what have you, it couldn't keep up. You could barely even notice it was running. You could see grey shapes in the bush line ahead of you. Sometimes you couldn't make out what they were, but they were grey angular shapes, and we were firing at those things. Shooting mortars directly at them. I was anyway. Not that it was having much of an effect. On troops that didn't have armor protecting them, it would have been a problem. But otherwise, bouncing off armor. What had happened was 1-2 Charlie. Now, 1-2 Charlie was about 30 meters to my right, because obviously we'd taken 1-2 Bravo's position when half their crew was shot out 2 days prior to that. And it's a hell of a thing being in the attack formation, being one of the Ratels in the attack formation, and all you got is a 60 mil and a 7.62 Browning. What I would have given for the 20 mil at that stage. So anyway, 1-2 Charlie, who was just to my right hand side, about 30 meters to my right. A T-55 burst through the bush line just ahead of us, and Mitten, or MJ Mitten, the gunner, lined this T-55 up, and he drilled it. But he just kept this continual stream of armor-piercing rounds at this tank, and eventually you saw this tank. I was watching it, and I could see the smoke starting to pour out of the tank just below the turret. And eventually the crew jumped out, because this thing started burst into flame. The crew jumped out, and as they jumped out, obviously they were all cut down by machine gun rounds and 20 mil rounds as they tried to clear off the turret. I just remember Mitten calling over the air that he had taken out a T-55 directly ahead, when another T-55 burst out of the bush line just behind the one he'd shot out, and they fired around, and it hit Skitter, which was 1-2 Charlie's driver, hit top left-hand side of his window, driver's window, blew Skitter to bits, and took off Mitten's one leg. Didn't quite take his leg off, but made one hell of a mess of his leg. And I just heard over the air that 1-2 Charlie's hit. I remember turning the turret slightly to the right, and all I saw was this tendril of smoke pouring out of the driver's window of 1-2 Charlie, and its 20 mil cannon facing directly upwards, facing skywards. What had happened was that Mitten, as soon as they were hit and his leg was taken out, he, like any gunner, thought that what would happen is that his driver wouldn't be able to get out of the hatch, because the gun was obviously blocking the hatch. So he, without thinking of himself initially, he turned the gun to the left-hand side, elevated the gun as much as possible so his driver could get out, little knowing that his driver wasn't there anymore. Mitten managed to pull himself off the turret and fell to the ground on the side of the Ratel, and it's a hell of a drop. Anyway, troopers, I think it was Charles and Leafy Michiel, grabbed him, maybe one or two others, and they pulled him to safety, or pulled him out of the way of the burning Ratel. It was a hell of a thing, and we, Schultz and myself, we were I was just firing 7.62 Browning as fast as I could at this tank, but all that was happening was the rounds were just, you could see the traces bouncing off it like described as harmless fireflies. They were just bouncing off, and we started screaming over the air, "Where are the tanks? Where are the tanks? Waar is die fucking tanks? Ons help no." It was as scary as all hell, and I remember sitting in that turret. There's something I'll never forget, printed in my memory forever, is the fact that I glanced to the left, and as I did that, there was a hell of an explosion. And I looked at Schultz, and his whole headset lifted off his head and slammed back down. The whole turret was just covered in dust and smoke, and the noise was incredible. Yeah, I describe it as God switching the off button. What had happened was that one of our olifants had pulled up right next to us, and he let off a round, which was right next to our turret. And what had happened was he blew the whole turret off the T-55 directly ahead of us. It was insane. I've never had adrenaline like that in my life. Your whole life just stops dead, and it's insane. You can't describe it. Anyway, sure. Rounds started, obviously carried on bouncing off the armor, banging, and we suddenly came back to reality, and just carried on firing that Browning and just keeping it running like crazy. Shooting 60 mils into the Fapla positions. What happened was another one of the olifants drove in further to my right-hand side. I was watching it come forward. I was watching it through the soft block, and then it had the 3-2 battalion oaks sitting behind it on the turret, and they were all crowded behind the turret trying to get a bit of protection from incoming rounds. And a Fapla 82 mortar suddenly exploded on the back of the tank. And I saw these oaks. I couldn't believe it. It was like watching in living color. Well, I describe it in the book as watching in dying color. It was shocking. These oaks just, a few of them just fell backwards, and they all rolled off the back of the tank. It was absolutely insane. So what happened was that the olifants were now fully integrated with us in the front row, and we were all firing like crazy. Our 90s miraculously appeared as well, and we were firing at the Fapla tanks in front of us. The battlefield ahead was insane. It as I said, it looked like something out of a movie. You had phosphorus rounds going off, massive explosions. The tanks that were burning in front of us were just, they were exploding. I remember looking at that T-55, which was burning in front of us, and just thinking, shit, that could have been our metal coffin. It was so close. So anyway, it was a crazy battle, and it just carried on. As I say, what seemed like half an hour ended up being, I think, the battle from start to finish was about 5 hours long. It was just continual fighting, and everything. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And then what happened was one of the tanks. No, sorry, that happened. Just I got a bit confused. Our troops were in trenches. They'd found there were empty trenches, and they obviously dived to the best cover they could, and they were having their own Barney from that angle. And we pulled back to go and get more ammo and rearm. And that was in the tree line where we'd stopped initially. Get back into there. So Fambalion whacked us into reverse. We bounced over all the trenches, back into the tree line, and I jumped off the top of the turret. Schultz, myself, and our medic, who we used to nickname Epidemic. We ran back to the Quaffles and started grabbing bags of ammo, those plastic bags of 5.56 ammo, the boxes of 7.62 for the Browning, And we were running laps backwards and forwards to the Quaffles and just dumping it into the Ratel, into our Ratel. Doors are open and we just poured the stuff in. I remember running back and seeing these 232 battalion oaks that were both wounded. And they were wandering around, looked a bit dazed. And I pointed them towards where the Runkels was, where the medics were. And the amazing thing was this one oak was walking around and he had half the top of his head blown off. It was crazy. His friend was helping him kind of stagger around, and the guy was holding the sides of his head together like this. And he wasn't doing the greatest of jobs because you could see the grey brain mush squeezing out between his fingers. I mean, it's shit like that you sure can't forget. Anyway, we stacked up the Ratel full of ammo. And we got in touch with our lootie who was on the ground at that stage, and he said that he'd gooi rooi flat, red smoke, so we'd know where they were in the trenches. As we burst back through the tree line, you won't believe it, but the whole battlefield in front of us was just covered in red smoke. So we didn't know where our guys were, and so I said to Fambulion, just go. I saw red smoke ahead of us, and I said, just go straight towards those oaks. And we bounced through the trenches, and we headed towards that. As we came up to them, we realized it was a platoon of 3-2 battalion guys who were dug in. What had happened was the mag gunner, mag 1 and 2 had been hit by, I don't know, it was a heavy weaponry, whether it was an 82 mortar or RPG, I'm not sure. But the one guy was dead, and the other guy was badly ripped up, and but he was still alive. So medic ran off towards him. I jumped off the side and slid down the side of the Ratel, went to help him. We picked up this oak with the help of the other 3-2 oaks. There were still rounds coming in, but it was thinning out a bit. I just remember picking up this oak, or trying to pick up this guy, and medic got him sort of under his shoulders, and he was picking up and walking backwards towards the Ratel. And I picked up this oak. I tried to grab his arm, and his arm almost came off in my arm. His blood all over the show and what have you. And I just remember getting to the side of the Ratel and with the help of Schultz, picking him up, and medic went in first. Sat on the bench, and this guy was lying on the floor in front of him on his lap. And yes, our medic was trying his damnedest to keep this poor bugger alive. Not a hell of a lot of hope though. I just remember we closed the doors hissed closed, climbed back up onto the turret, and we took the guy straight back into the bush line, to the Runkels. He climbed down again. Medics came towards us with the stretcher. I climbed down, helped take him out. And I just remember that door opened. Medic was covered, epidemic. He was just covered from top to toe in this oak's blood. And we picked this oak up as best we could. He was barely alive, and we put him down on the stretcher. Medics took him from there, and they put him in the Runkels. I just remember climbing up the side of the Ratel, and as I got to the top, I just noticed that I'd left bloody handprints all over the side of the Ratel, and it was unpleasant, very unpleasant. And you start thinking to yourself, shit, does my mother know what I'm doing right now? Anyway, hopped back into the Ratel and went back to join the battle again. Burst through the tree line. Oh, by the way, that one of our guys was in the Runkels, same Runkels as they were pulling away and taking. One of our wounded guys was also being taken away in the same. He said, a 3-2 battalion oak. He lasted about another 10 minutes after they drove off, but then he copped it. He died. Anyway, so we went back into the battle towards the trenches. As I say, there were still BTR, FAPA tanks, you name it, burning away in front of us. And yeah, we tried to go through the, there was a minefield in front of us. One of the olifants ran further forward and had one of its tracks blown off by one of the mines. And then what happened was one of the Ratels, I'm not sure which Ratel it was, went forward and also hit a mine, disabled it, and it was taken out by T-55. Driver was killed. I can't remember which company it came from, but yeah, another one of our fatalities. What happened then was we all had to give covering fire, so we lined up and we just fired all our ammo at at what was left of the Fopler positions ahead of us, and they brought up what they call a plofadder. Plofadder is it's a charge. What happens is the guys bring it up, and I think it was I can't remember, but I think it would have been a SAML 20 or something like that. And what happens is it's this charge, which is in a kind of it's rolled up like a snake. It's a long charge which they would shoot up, and it snakes out over the minefield and explodes with a hell of a downward pressure, and it's supposed to set off all the mines in that area. And what you got is then a lane that you can drive through and then carry on attacking the enemy from there. So what happened was we were parked there giving this plofadder plenty of covering fire, and we were all sitting there watching this thing and hoping like hell it's going to go off. It fires up its thing, snakes out ahead of it, and nothing happens. Then I think they brought up another one, if I can remember correctly. Tried the same thing, nothing happened. What had happened was these things worked really well on the Ratel, but didn't handle the drive all the way through the southern Angolan bush on those roads, and it just didn't do the trick. So we were the hell in, because we were told then we had to so we all had to regroup and pull back. Needless to say, everyone was the hell in about that, because we definitely had dealt them a serious blow, and they were vacating the positions and running away. The second time in 2 days that had happened, and we were cross about it. I remember one to Charlie's Van Aert, Corporal Van Aert. He had to be read the riot act by our Luti. He didn't want to move. As far as he was concerned, we could just charge across that minefield and take out the last of the Fopler defenders. But anyway, orders are orders. We regrouped and pulled back. Once again having to chase down that same brigade, a little bit later. So hell of a thing. We pulled back a bit, back into the bush line. I remember sitting there, it was probably about half an hour later or whatever. We were all gathered. Well, all the vehicles were gathered around, and over the air came. I'm not sure if it came directly from one of the recce's, but you heard this BM 21 coming over the air, and you knew that, hey, here comes a salvo of BM 21s, and they came screaming in at us, Stalin Orl, as they used to call it, Stalin organ, and they came screaming in and exploded close by. Obviously, once again, you closed the hatch, but I must admit, didn't really give a damn at that stage, because yes, what we'd just been through was insane. Straight after that, the G5s did a counter battery, and instantly you actually heard it over the radio. The guys confirmed that they'd taken out the BM21. Once again, that G5 artillery our artillery guys were incredible. I mean, they had so much to do with us winning those battles. It was incredible. The accuracy, the counter battery of anything that moved was insane. And once again, we had the recce sitting there watching their every move, and every time there was a bottleneck of vehicles going over a bridge or something like this, these oaks would come in, and they would the G5s, they'd guide them in, they'd just bomb the shit out of them. It was incredible. Yeah, so then we pulled back. We pulled out to another TB later on that afternoon. I checked out that two of our 6 tires had been shot away. Sure, I tell you, the incoming rounds was insane. Fambulion climbed out of the Ratel, and he looked at the front of the sloping armor. Now, as everyone knows, the Ratel's got kind of a pointed nose, and the bottom slope, pretty much where his feet would have been, there was a huge gouge taken out of the armor there. So a heavy round, and it might have been a tank round, I'm not sure, but a heavy round had hit that, and geez, if that thing had got through, it would have been taken off his legs and everything else down there, and I was sitting just behind him. It wouldn't have been a very pleasant situation, I tell you. Yeah, the adrenaline took a while to wear off. It's a hell of a thing, because we still had to change the two tires. So luckily our spare tire on the top of the Ratel was still all right, so we replaced one of the 2 tires with that one. We took another spare tire from one of the command Ratels behind us, so our tires were then fixed. And yeah, later on that evening, when the sun went down, became dark, in through the choppers again to come and pick up the dead and the wounded and the body bags. Yeah, that same old thing where everybody huddles close and keeps the guys talking, because yeah, not a good situation. It was an insane, intense battle like you cannot believe. And as I was saying, the actual fighting lasted for about 5 hours. Now, what that does to you physically and mentally, it tires you out insanely, because you're going full taps adrenaline from the moment you start. And that was, well, pretty much an adrenaline pumping from 4 o'clock in the morning when we started our attack, type thing. It was insane. And yeah, I was, needless to say, stressing about the fact that they kept us in the front line, even though one of our Ratels, 1-2 Bravo, had half its crew was missing at that stage. And it was crazy, because all I had there as a defensive weapon was a 60 mm mortar and a Browning. Not the greatest thing to come up against main battle tanks with. That's really, yeah, I just remember one of the funny things, or I think it was one of the shittier things we did the next day or what have you, was we started splitting up the guys' rat packs who were no longer with us. It's not a lacquer thing to do, but shit, they're not going to eat them, and we were permanently hungry, so we would we'd take them and split up the rat packs. It's a crazy thing, the things you think about. That night and the following day, the Tiffies came around to do any repairs. I mean, those guys were incredible. The limited machinery and stuff that they had to work on Ratels in, deep southern Angola with nothing to work on. They would replace a Ratel's engine, a massive bloody bussing, this engine. And it was insane what these guys did. They would come around to each and every single vehicle, check that everything was still working 100% right, check all the weapons, make sure your guns they were happy with them, you were happy with them. They checked it all out. So, and then we rearmed over the next day or two, rearmed, refueled, and once again we were off chasing the Fappler brigades. I think it was if I'm correct, it was the 21st Brigade. So we were chasing the 16th and the 21st Brigade, and the idea was to set up an ambush, and the idea was to trap the 21st Brigade against the Vimpulo River before they could get around it, around the kind of source of it, which was in an easterly direction, if that makes any sense. So these brigades were running towards to get around to get into what we later called the Tumpo Triangle towards Cuito Carnaval. the idea was that we set up an ambush and trapped them against the river and did another reenactment of the Battle of the Lomba, where we could catch him and take them apart, on the edge of the river. Well, what happened was the communication wasn't like great as far as we were concerned. Even though I was on the company net, we still didn't quite understand the bigger picture, what we should have done. Not that it would have really made much difference because we were following orders and what have you. And we were ordered to set up a pretty much in battle formation, an ambush. So we set up this ambush and we were waiting, but apparently we'd set up the ambush 6 kilometers away from the actual crossing point where they were going to get away from us. We didn't realize this. And this was one of the biggest mistakes that was made in the whole campaign, was the fact that we let the Fopler brigades get past us, get between us and the river. And apparently it was, not that I can remember, but there was a massive thunderstorm that night. And anyway, they managed to cross the river or get away from us. The next morning, all hell broke loose because command realized that had let them slip past us. And the chase was on. It's actually called the Shambinga Gallop. And we were galloping like crazy trying to catch these oaks. Jeez, I'll tell you, that was the next rough ride I had, because we were bounced all over that Ratel, second to none, as we were chasing these oaks down. Eventually, and there was a few days in between, our previous battle, which was on the 11th, and eventually trying to ambush these guys. So it was the 16th of November. We closed in on the 21st Brigade. Now, the 21st Brigade hadn't been a whole bunch of rivers coming out there. And I think it was the Hube River, Hube, if I remember correctly. And 21st Brigade hadn't been able to ford this river. They hadn't been able to get across it. And they were heading back along the edge of the river, coming effectively towards us. And we knew here, so we reckoned that this was our chance to catch these oaks. Well, luckily sanity had prevailed, and in foresight, and they'd taken platoon 2. We were now put in reserve, and platoon 3 was put in our place. So platoon 3 was front left of the battle formation. On their right-hand side was platoon 1, which had been in the front with us all the time, but platoon 3, and we were put in reserve just behind them. And look, at that stage, we had suffered in our platoon of 30 plus oaks. We'd suffered almost a 50% casualty rate at that stage. Well, four guys have been killed and 11 wounded. So we'd taken a bit of flack. Anyway, we were going forward, and forward in this battle formation. We knew that I think it was 21 Brigade, we were just ahead of us. And next thing, fire broke out again, going like crazy. Massive incoming barrage of BM21s, 82 mm mortars, you name it, the usual tap, I call it in the book, of RPDs, AK-47 rounds exploding like crazy. I mean, incoming rockets and what have you. We replied with a massive fire belt action. Remember, we were moving forward, and we were just behind platoon 3 ahead of us, this one of their platoon sergeants or platoon corporals, I can't remember his name, but he was a big guy, and this piece of shrapnel almost cut him in half. And it was insane. I remember as we were driving past, one of his guys was trying to hold him up and kind of pull him backwards, and this poor guy was just, it was like trying to hold a puppet on cut strings. It was shocking. And the amazing thing about it, we drove past, and the medics were running towards us, trying to help him, and it's insane. You see this guy, he was pretty much dying right in front of me, and I was almost just dead to it. You just carried on operating. was insane. Anyway, a massive battle going on ahead of us, and big field for Roxy, and we move forward. Anyway, we're going forward, and next thing, these very grey shapes appear in the bush ahead of us. Now, we were behind platoon 3. You could still see these things in the distance just ahead of us. And it was another tank ambush. 4 T-55s burst through the bush ahead of us. And they started attacking platoon 3, which they had 90 mils with them. But everybody turned around, these 90 mils backed off and started reversing and backing off at a hell of a rate. And we were just behind them. And these tanks were firing at platoon 3's Ratels as they were reversing. I just remember one of these rounds comes screaming through the bush next to us and exploding right next to my right middle tire again, shredding it, and the noise was insane inside that Ratel. Our troops luckily they were still inside the Ratel, and these guys were going mad because they were now stuck in this this metal coffin, and they didn't know what the hell was going on. All they knew was the bangs and you name it, huge explosions going off and what have you. And, that's one thing always blows my mind is my driver, Fambiljon, was sitting there with this big glass window in front of him. He could see exactly what was going on in front of him, and there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. And he just had to rely on the fact that, well, what I could do with my gun and the instructions we were giving him as far as we're concerned, to move as quickly as possible, was the right thing to do. And this guy was so unflappable, I tell you. He's so brave. What had happened was everybody was pulling back at a hell of a rate of knots towards us, and we were also in reverse, moving backwards away from this tank ambush, because these T-55 are very aggressive, coming towards us. And what had happened was 1-3, which was their command Ratel, same as was mine was a Ratel 1-2. 1-3 was their gunner was P.F. Botwood. This guy had been with us for a long time anyway. He was the Ratel 60 gunner, and they were caught out in the open. What had happened was they had a few of the tires shot out, and they weren't moving back quickly enough, and these tanks were getting closer and closer to them. And this guy, his driver had pretty much lost his shit at that stage. He was screaming, going mad. And P.F. Botwood told him to flap. You have those armor flaps on the side of your windscreens or your windshields. He told him to flap those things up, so it blocked out his view completely. And he said, "Don't look." He said, "I'll guide you." And he told him, accelerate backwards, stop, accelerate backwards, stop. As these tanks in front of them were, stopping because they had to stop to fire the guns at him, he would reverse at a rate of knots. It was something to watch. We could see this happening in front of us. And it was crazy. This guy was playing cat and mouse in a little Ratel with very, very thin armor against the squad of tanks. Well, they came screaming towards us. The tail gunner jumped out and ran for his life because he'd had enough. And the way P.F. Botwood managed to guide this oak back towards us was insane, absolutely incredible. And just as they were getting towards us, and these rounds were going off because the tanks kept missing them and almost hitting us just behind them in bushes. This a squadron of 3 2 battalions, 90 mils burst out of the bush just right next to where we were. And I think it was Hannes Nordman's guys. And yes, they climbed into these tanks. Incredible. They were absolutely fearless. And this was close quarters. I mean, the distances were between 30 and 50 meters. I mean, it was crazy how close it was happening. And these oaks tore into these 4 tanks, and they were just firing and moving and firing. It was crazy. And they managed to take out all of these tanks, and they pretty much saved a lot of guys that day. They were very brave. But there's one thing I cannot compare: is the bravery of that 60mm gunner, PF Botha. That guy deserved a medal. I'm telling you, it was insane. I wrote the book and I sent it out on the group, and his sister actually contacted me and said, thanks so much for telling the story, because she didn't know her brother had passed. He passed away about a year or two ago. And yes, what a brave guy. But she was so chuffed that she heard the story of what her groot boetie did up there. Insane. Yeah, it was. You know what? Sorry, as this fight was going on, we were reversing our 81mm mortar Ratels were directly behind us. Now they were always behind us, and they were our mobile artillery, close-in mobile artillery. And these guys were, yes, I tell you, they were firing almost vertically, because the Fopler attack was getting really close. Now these tanks were coming at us, but they had infantry in between them. And the 81s were annoying these guys. I'll tell you, they were shooting almost vertically above us or from behind us. It was crazy. And they were cutting down these 81mm mortars. Were just cutting down the troops in between those tanks absolutely like crazy. Once those tanks had been shot out, obviously we started moving forward again, and we moved forward what I refer to as the Valley of Death. Geez, it was something else. Forever printed in my memory, that's for sure. There were just Fopler soldiers lying everywhere. Body parts blown off, and it was insane. Yeah, it looked like something out of a Terminator movie. Yeah, insane. Anyway, we drove through that and got to what I'd never seen, or I hadn't seen for such a long time. Was we were actually on a little bit of a high ground, and just below us, and it wasn't much below us. I suppose the drop off was only about 30 meters or so, height that we were above a dry riverbed, and we were told to stop there. And this is the first time in a long time we've been able to see more than like 50, 60 meters ahead of us, because there's so many trees. And you could actually see over the top of these trees below us, which was quite something. And then suddenly we were told to start fire and all the rest, as the troops behind us came through, and they picked their way through the battle area. But we were in front, and we were looking down over this dry riverbed. And next thing, this BTR broke through the bush and drove across the riverbed with about 3 or 4 oaks running next to it, with another 3 or 4 guys on top of the BTR. And we saw this, and we looked like, what the hell? This is a Fopler, and they're getting away from us. So we said, hey, we're going to fire on it. Instead of, the guys shouldn't have even asked. They should have just opened fire with the 20 mils. They would have ripped that thing apart. But we were told, no, don't open fire. For some, I still don't understand why. I got the alien and I pumped a few 60mm mortars, because you could see the dust of them driving between the trees as they went off in the distance. And I pumped a few 60mm mortars, just give them a go-away present from our side. Until I was ordered, don't stop fire, start fire. Anyway, at that stage, I think we were running low on fuel, and we were told, no, we can't chase anyone again. Then we pulled back again, replenished, did all that fun stuff. For the next few days, we kind of drove around a bit, and kind of replenished us all our ammunition and what have you. And then I think it was about a week later. When was it that? I'm not sure. It was about a week later. Anyway, we drove up onto the Shambinga high ground, and we were going to do an attack towards Quito off the Shambinga high ground. Now that's pretty self-explanatory. It's high ground. There's not a hell of a lot of high ground around there, and quite a tall hill. It certainly wasn't a mountain, but it was a tall hill, and it was kind of I remember double fold being in it, and we were prepped beforehand how we were going to get up this thing. So anyway, we drove up. I remember coming over the kind of crest of it, and there was another bit of high ground on our left-hand side. And Fapla had been entrenched a few days prior on this, but they'd been chased off. And we presumed, or the information that we'd got was that they'd vacated the trenches. But we weren't 100% sure. So we were driving along and, keeping an eye on the left-hand side, because we were all nervous as hell that they were going to open fire from us from ground above us, which would have been a problem. So we kept driving along, and just remember driving along, and obviously you drive in the vehicle's tracks directly ahead of you. The golden rule says do not drive off those tracks. And sure as hell, a Withings recovery vehicle approached us on our left-hand side and was overtaking us. And these guys, I remember the 3 guys in the cab, and they were joking and hiding on, and we were telling them, shouting backwards and forwards at everybody. And as they came past us, a massive explosion on their back left-hand tire, luckily for them, back left-hand wheel, blew this off. And obviously we were nervous as all hell. Everybody ducks back into their turrets, swings their turrets to the left, and opens fire on these old Fapla positions above us, thinking that we were being attacked from there. Meanwhile, what had happened was suddenly there was a stark feud. There was no incoming fire at us at all. These silly buggers had set off a landmine because they had decided it was a good idea to overtake. Yeah, the old trick was you've got to drive in the tracks behind, the tracks in front of you. You follow those tracks because that place was littered with landmines. Anyway, a bit later we started coming off the high ground into a fairly flat, open plain ahead of us. We were, I'm just trying to remember, sorry, I was trying to remember what I think it was the Tumpo Triangle we were coming towards, that open piece of ground pretty much in front of Quito Carnival. And we started approaching towards, I don't know if it's the Shambinga Bridge, but towards that area of Quito. And yes, all hell broke loose. They started all the artillery. So the artillery, as what Daniel speaks about later, the artillery came down on us like absolute crazy. There were BM-21s, D-30s, I think they are, from 59th Brigade, which was also entrenched in that area, and with the bigger 130 mil shells coming in from Quito. It was absolutely crazy. We'd never been under artillery fire like that. I tell you, Daniel has some good descriptions when he says that the ground was boiling. These rounds were just coming down, and I just remember anything on top of a Ratel, whether it would have been the spare tire or the camo net or whatever, by the time we were finished there, it was completely shredded. It was just, there were rounds coming down, mortars, you name it, everything was coming down on us. It was absolutely crazy. So yes, we drove, we advanced for about an hour or so, and eventually we were told to withdraw. It was a complete, a complete act of futility as far as I was concerned, a dangerous exercise where it obviously they didn't realize that all of probably about 3 or 4 brigades worth of artillery was all centered in that area, and the guys in the Ops Hooper and what have you, Packer and what have you, that came in after us, they bore the brunt of that. So anyway, we withdrew from there. back up onto the Shambinga high ground. And yeah, I remember taking a break there the one evening and watching our what do you call them, our missiles, taking off and firing off towards the Fopler positions. It was actually quite something to watch as it was getting dark, kind of that sunset. The MRLs would fire off a ripple or so onto the Fopler brigades. And you sit there and it was like watching Guy Fawkes. These things would fire off, and you just watch these streaking through the sky as these missiles were shooting in towards the Fopler brigades. Then they'd hit their kind of zenith, or whatever you'd call it, their highest point, and then I think the motors or whatever on the back of them would cut out, and it would be quiet for a while, and then you'd just hear this sort of rumble, grumble as the earth and the whole ground would shake and what have you. Anyway, yeah, I remember that night sitting there and just suddenly it hit me again, that brown wave that I spoke about before when I was at Italy. I think my body had said enough was enough. And gastro again, I just remember being able to grab a roll of boutgoed, witgoed, toilet paper and running off and making it to the bushes close by. And yes, only just in time. I was stuffed. At that stage of the game, we'd been in the bush for months now without having a bath, without washing yourself, without cleaning yourself. The same uniform, which was literally almost falling apart at that stage. Disgusting. I mean, we smelt like, I write a section in the book about someone dropping something in a Ratel, and the smell was something terrible. But the crazy thing was everybody smelled the same, because you were all eating the same food, and you'd been eating the same food for the last 3 months or whatever it was. And everybody would blame everybody else, and eventually, actually, that's another thing. It's one thing you suddenly realize that poor old Familjon again. Everybody else could open the hatches and get out of there and get some fresh air, but Familjon was stuck in his driver's compartment, sickling with the smell. Shame, man. Anyway, by that stage, you got so many cuts in your hands and all over the show, and they immediately became septic because, it was a dirty, it was stiff environment. Everything was just dirty, everything was stiff. The flies, oh man, I write on and on about flies. The flies were terrible. There were like thousands on you a day. And anyway, so we started pulling back. So they pulled us back on the way to Mavinga. I remember stopping in a section, and they chopped in some what they called fresh steaks. Now we hadn't had fresh meat to eat in months now, and we're looking forward to this. Well, I remember them offloading. Everybody just ran to the choppers to help offload from the Pumas, help them offload this meat. Yeah, and we got this stuff, and it was green. I tell you, it was green, and it smelled off. But nobody even bothered not eating it. I reckon this was greater. So he took out your spades. You made a fire and put the spade on top of it, and these big slabs of rump steak. Shit, I tell you, they were lazy aged. They were green, but yes, that was the best steak I've ever eaten in my life. Yeah, it was brilliant. And needless to say, after we'd had that meal, we had to run back off into the bush for a good old boskak again, because, geez, I tell you, that stuff went straight through your tummy. No one's stomach was used to that. Anyway, so then we headed back towards Mavinga. I remember arriving in Mavinga. I think we spent a day or so there, and then they got us ready one night, pitch black. Our logistic vehicles, our queffels and what have you, got to us. There was a bolsaka which had fresh clothing in it, and that was a treat. That was an absolute treat, like you couldn't believe. We took, and I think that clothing that we had on, we literally threw it in the fire, burned that stuff. The problem about it was so stiff and so greasy at that stage that if you came close to a naked flame, too close to the braai, it would have set you alight. He took you took those clothes off, and I reckon they could walk off on their own. They had their own life to them. Disgusting. Anyway, got our new clothes, and yeah, that was an absolute treat. And managed to organize a bath. You dig a hole in the ground, you'd stretch out a bivvy across it, pour a bit of water in there, and you'd sit there in this bath. You'd only be able to cover your nuts, your bum, and what have you, but that was the main thing, to have a bit of a bath. And then you put on these fresh clothes. Man, it was unbelievable. Anyway, that night, or the night after, I can't remember, but in the pitch dark, sorry, the most important thing was the handover of the Ratels. So we're sitting there, and the new roofs arrived from Forsyth, and they'd come up, and that's where Daniel comes in, Daniel Botwood. Your previous chat with Daniel, and yeah, he described us. I looked rough. We felt rough. We had been through the bush backwards, and he says, yeah, all of us had this, call it the 1,000-mile stare or whatever. We'd just been through hell and back, and we handed over the Ratels, and yeah, Daniel said we didn't scare them, but I think we did try to every now and again, because you say, like, hey, look at this. Yeah, check where the bullet splashes were, and this and the next thing. No, but I think we gave them a lot of advice, on keeping low, digging in as soon as you can, just and things like, in lightly, you'd go into a practice attack, and your turret would be open, your turret flaps would be open, or your actual turrets would be. There's no way when you get into firefights like that. You've got to keep those turrets closed, otherwise you'll lose the top of your head very quickly. Anyway, so we handed vehicles over to these guys, and gave them a bit of a rough send off. And that night we felt almost naked, because our metal mothers were gone. We'd handed them on, so we slept under the stars that night. And I can't remember it was that night, but we walked through the bushes, and ended up at the Mavinga dirt airstrip. Now this airstrip had been going for months, and the Air Force were absolutely brilliant. I mean, these guys, every night, I think they'd sent in about 4 flights, and they were either the Flossies or the C-160 Transals, that they would fly in the middle of the night, pitch dark of night, because obviously the MiGs, they were worried about the MiGs during the day. And these guys would come, and they would land on a strip, which was up to about 10 seconds before the end was pitch dark. They would have a whole bunch of UNITA guys standing along the edge of the strip. And as the Flossie, I just remember standing there, pitch dark, and we were all standing in a group wondering what the hell was going on. And this Flossie comes low level over the top of us. Wow! This thing came screaming over, pitch dark. Geez, and I thought to myself, how the hell did the guys even find this airstrip? And so he circled around, and he came back in. And as he came back towards us, all these UNITA guys lit these little ratback tins on the ground, and this pilot came in, and he touched down. Incredibly, how good our pilots were was insane. I mean, it was unbelievable. Anyway, he came down to the end of the runway to where we were, swung around. That there were no lights on, nothing. It was still pitch dark. He swung around in front of us. We got pelted with stones and what have you from the prop wash of this thing, and its back tail, the tail lift dropped down, and we all jammed ourselves in there. We ran up onto the thing, dumped our ball sucker down, used our orifice to kind of balance ourselves, and we sat down on this like a bunch of sardines in the back of this, and they chased us in. We had to move our asses to get in there quickly as possible, and not once they do not switch off the motors or the props of those planes at all. They swing them around, and they keep running, and you've got to load everybody in there in about 30 seconds flat, and he barely even stops moving. Tailgate up. I don't even think the tail flap was up, and he was running down the runway again to take off. And next thing, tail flap up, pitch darkness again, and he took off. Man, I don't think he made higher than about 30 meters or 30 feet above the ground. It was crazy. And I think we went treetop height all the way back to Grootfontein, I think it was, yeah. And Grootfontein or Rundu, we landed there, came off. That put us back into, what were they, Quairfields? Strange enough, took us back across the river, back into Angola and into the Deergangskamp. So it was like a transit camp, which they'd hacked out of the bush there. It was a huge camp, which they'd hacked out of the bush there. And yeah, we all got our tents, and we got mattresses for the first time in months. It was unbelievable. You know, what a little bit of comfort was insane. I just remember sleeping that first night and, you know, trying to relax, but body was still on high alert. Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And they fed us really well. One of the crazy things that happened was they decided that we needed some kind of debrief. So they brought up these psychiatrists, and these guys had been, they'd obviously just come off their studies in the States, and they came up, and each one of them was given a group of about, I don't know, about 20 guys. And I remember this guy coming up and standing in front of us and saying, okay, guys, you've been through hell, so the best thing to do is talk about it. And yeah, interesting, because the guys said, okay, sure, let's talk about it. And they started telling the stories. I tell you, after about the first 10 minutes, this guy was in tears. He didn't know what to do. Yeah, some of the stories were, you know, not stories you'd tell your grandchildren type thing. It was, yeah, they were hectic. Eventually, this guy said, look, best thing you can do is chat about it. And that was that. And that was the closest we ever got to a debrief by any psychiatrist or any kind of medical thing. That for the mental stuff we go through, and we still go through to this day, stuff you won't forget. Anyway, I don't remember much about the flight back to the States. Anyway, we flew in there. Neither the drive back to Middelburg, Forsyth, who arrived there, and then a day or two later, well, in fact, it was a few days later, I think they decided, okay, come on, guys, it's time to fly out. So you got to hand in your kit. I remember going to the stores, and that was something interesting, because the store masters and the guys working in the stores would say, okay, here's the list of kit you're supposed to give back. And I remember them coming to 1-2 Charlie's guys and saying, okay, where's your helmet? Where's your R4? Where's this? Where's that? You know, and the guys, I remember Corporal van Aert almost climbing over the desk and attacking one of the guys, because yeah, you know, they were doing stupid things like calling out guys' names who were no longer with us. They were dead. Yeah, so yeah, hectic stuff. And a lot of the you know, a lot of the equipment that we had was gone. It was like literally gone, missing. And yeah, she's, I tell you, we had the store sergeant major, or whatever it was, had to climb in there and sort of defuse the situation. Yeah, then the next day, I think it was, we cheered on to fly out, and yeah, and suddenly you're back in Civvy Street, which was absolutely crazy. You know, two weeks ago, we'd been in Angola, kill or be killed, and now you're in Civvy Street. Yeah, of course, it was yeah, absolutely crazy. You know, you didn't get a proper debrief. You didn't get a proper psychiatric sort of assessment. Are you guys okay? And there's not one guy that was up there. You know, they talk about you leaving parts of yourself behind. Yeah, we certainly did, whether it was mental, physical. You know, a lot of the guys. Yeah, we lost, as I say, we just, our platoon alone lost about half of its guys, whether they were wounded or, yeah, a few guys killed. But yeah, hell of a thing. You know, you don't talk about it. You don't. That's what I say. You know, I wrote the book, and I talk about the way we don't talk about these things. You know, we sit around a fire, and often you have the guys, you know, a lot of your mates in the army, you know, do things, and invariably they start talking about the stuff they did in the army. And I tend to find that I've got to watch what I say, because if I start talking about those battles like on the 11th day of the 11th month, where so much stuff happened, it suddenly, suddenly the conversation goes very quiet, and I look at you. Nah, you know, either you bullshitting or there's something wrong with you. You know, not lekker. And I think that's why a lot of the acts want to talk about it. You know, and that's why we do these talks. Is so people in the States never knew what we were on about. You know, and my friends, family, you know, they read the book and they went, "Whew, bloody hell, you never told us this," you know. Didn't realize the type of shit you guys went through. And so that's my story. It's it's a hell of a story that I feel anyway. And that's why I wrote a book about it. So anyway, here's my book. Fame at last. And you know, I write a book, and it's there's a lot of humor in it too, a lot of army humor, which I don't talk about now when I tell you the story. But you know, everything from going for a good old boskak to the food, and yes, the nonsense we went through. You know, a whole bunch of youngsters fresh out of school, full of testosterone and just causing trouble all the time. And you know, what you call it, the best time you had in your life, the worst time you had in your life. You know, insane. Sure. Yeah, Koos, anyway, and that's the end of my story. Thanks a more for recording it, and hopefully it's good for history. You know. Top. Right.
Steve,
Thank you.
I say to you that this is one of the great stories, and guys, that is the reason why legacy exists, because you have to come and tell us your story. This is history, man. We will speak about the book, guys. I'm gonna leave a link for the book as well, and all those things here in the description. But let me do a few administrative things quickly, because you guys know we've been going almost 5 years now. Millions of views, million of hours of watching. Thank you for all of you. I really appreciate. It is sadly so that they say that the victor, of course, writes the history books. And therefore, unless you guys come to a place like Legacy or similar channels or write your book, our side of the story will never come out. So guys, this is almost God-given. It's important. So contact me, talk to me while I'm still here and still willing and able to do this. But because we've been going so long, we do actually have a lot of videos already which will fill the story up, which will tell the story a little bit further than what the tactical sense of what Steve has seen. So if people don't mind, I'm just going to mention those videos to you, and I'll see if I can put links in the description to them as well. So that if you want to educate yourself, guys, please go and listen to what the veterans have to say. The first one up is Daniel Botwood. Now, I will never forget Danny. He's a good mate of mine. And would you believe he sat there smoking a Zol or something, which is like weed, while he was talking to us. And I was looking at this fellow and I thought, man, let me hear your story. And he turned out to be one of the great videos ever. He still owes me a video. He also wrote a book, a poetry book, would you believe? And I know that he and Steve is talking. Perhaps there will be a follow-up as well on Steve's book. So just look for Daniel Botwood. That is fantastic. And then, you know, we cannot take for granted that everyone here, I don't know when you're going to look at this, guys. You can look at this after we are dead and departed and forgotten. Even though with legacy will probably not fade away, we will still be there. You might not know what is a Ratel infantry fighting vehicle. And so I'm happy to say to you, we have a series of 3 videos which we made with Brigadier Tony Savides, where he is like the uncle of a Ratel. He wouldn't call himself a father of a Ratel, which is another colonel who actually would be. But we actually went to his house and he took us to Ratels and we actually walk around in them. And so please have a look at that series. And of course, General Savides have something in common with me and Steve here, that we're all from East London, all in enemy schools. I'm sure if we met on the rugby field, there would have been blood. But I can't remember meeting any of them. And General Savides, of course, is quite older than us. And then also, there's another video which is going to come out. Steve was talking about the Mechs. This is enemy aircraft flying over the battlefield. There is a book written called the Mech Diaries. And I'm glad to tell you that through Colonel Turin, who spoke to us about the F1CZ, that is air superiority one, as well as the Daniel Atlas Cheetah, which is a Mirage 3, which was rebuilt with Mirage 2000 parts. He has 2 videos out on that, but he's also setting it up for us that we're going to talk to the Mech Diary guys. And I'm looking forward to that very much. And then would you believe we actually have a Tiffy, good mate of mine now in Australia, Andries Weppener. He's one of the few Tiffies who came on the show. So guys, if you're a mechanic at Tiffy, please come and talk to me. You will hear all these guys say, you were fantastic, you were wonderful, I really appreciated you. Yeah, Steve's just sitting like this. Very true. But generals say that as well. Come and talk to me, don't screw around. Leave your spanners for a while and come and tell your story. But Dries was involved with Hooper and Modular. And this operation which Steve was talking about is called Modular in Afrikaans and Modular in English, I suppose. Then we have Hannes Nordman. He actually mentioned Hannes Nordman and one of Norris Crooks by firing the ZT-3, who's an anti-tank missile. And they stopped the entire Fapla brigade by doing that. And we have that video with a recording of what happened inside that Ratel during the battle, which is fantastic. I mean, just to get Hannes Nordman to speak to us is still one of those amazing things because he just doesn't. And we're really, really grateful to Colonel Nordman. And then, would you believe, there's also a girl, she lost a father was, I think, in 6-1 Mech, and he lost his lieutenant during the Battle of the Lomba River. And the name's Sharon, and she sang a song about it. She brought out a song called Battle Hymn of the Lomba River. That's also on Legacy, so please have a look at that. And I think, yeah, let's talk about quickly. I just want to mention this air bridge which Steve was talking about in Mavinga, where the aircraft, the transport aircraft, the C-160 and the C-150 would be flying nap of the earth just above the treetops to avoid the mix and radar, enemy radar. We have actually people talking about that. I think of Captain Walter Weiss. He was flying in quite often like that. And he also wrote a book, so just have a look for this guy. Some of his videos is not going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on the Rumble channel because he was speaking about other things which I couldn't dare to put on YouTube because they will ban us, once of liberal talk out of there. We not say that. And then also there's a Major Tinus van Jaarsveld who was actually at that very airstrip, and he got injured and lost a leg during the offloading of one of the C-150s. Walter Weiss was in command of that aircraft. And then Tinus van Jaarsveld went on and he became a chopper pilot, would you believe? He went on and he became a Alouette as well as a Puma pilot, and today he's running Kiramos. If you don't know what's Kiramos, please have a look. It is where the veterans are taking care of other veterans who've lost limbs or there's some kind of a disability, because I can guarantee you the South African military is not the American one. So there's no real veteran support. It is up to us. It is up to us to support each other. No one else is going to help you ever. So now that I've said all of these things, and also the last thing I will say is we also have a series on the G5 cannon. I always thought it was a howitzer, and then the Major General Koos bomb Laubscher and Colonel Pierre Franken from 32 Battalion support group, as was Colonel Hannes Dortman, Lieutenant Colonel actually, Commandant. They said to me there's no such thing as a howitzer. It is people who don't know artillery who talks about the howitzers. Okay, so I made a mistake in about 20 of my books. I'm not going to rectify it. I didn't know. But they talk about the G5, the G6, and they also speak about the Fis Arend, which I thought always was known as the Valkyrie. They say it can be both, and then they got extremely technical with me. There's 4 episodes of that out as well. So guys, please have a look, because this is now fascinating. This is where history comes in. Simply because we are now able to put the left card, the puzzle together. And once you've listened to all of these, and it'll take you many, many hours, you will have a complete picture, and you'll be surprised how many times the veterans come to me and they say, Koos, man, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know about that, and I didn't know about that. Oh yeah, and then we had a tank gunner also who was an ace. He was also around there in shooting with the tanks. And I believe he shot out 5 Angolan, Russian, Soviet tanks while he was there in the Oliphant tank. So everything is coming together. But now I have a few questions for you, if you don't mind, mate. Just to clarify, you said to me that you grew up in East London, which we know now at Selborne College, which is a good school. Let me tell you guys, they were flipping good. I was at the Afrikaans school called Grens, which is really not a good name in Afrikaans. It might mean border, which it probably is supposed to mean, but it also means to jump, to cry all the time. So it's really, anyway, and I said that General Savides was at Cambridge. Cambridge, right, Steve?
Yeah, I think he was at Cambridge. When I was chatting to him, he said he was at Cambridge. Yeah, also a good school initially while he was still there. Yes, sure.
Yeah, so you said to me that while you were there at Selborne, you guys would go to the beach. Which one?
Nahoon Beach. That's
Right.
that was our hangout, and yeah, I must admit it's a beautiful beach. I actually started off in my book talking about myself walking along the beach. It's like a comparison to the shit we went through as opposed to being on that beautiful, relaxing beach. It really is a lovely beach, and it's one thing about the beach. Yeah, when we were kids. Oh, the girls were good on that beach.
I think we were better at Canubia actually, because we had that constant 500. You remember it?
Yes.
Surfing people were there, and I saw some beautiful, but they were all English, and we couldn't speak the English that well. We tried, of course, deliciously, but yeah, well, you were lucky. You were lucky being English in East London. It's an English place. Okay, now we know that. It's Nahoon Beach. Guys, if you haven't been to Nahoon Beach, fantastic place. You can even walk to it on the sides, and that is a wonderful walk. I remember Rebecca, my wife, when we were there, she actually took a walk with her daughter right on the beach, and she came back this is a woman who visited more than 100 countries. And she said, this is the best ever. She loves that place. I must say, what I love in East London is the windmill. I wonder if it still exists.
The windmill's still there. It's had a major facelift and still one of the best places to go for burgers and slop chips, especially after you've had a hectic night out, the slop chip.
Yeah, no, it is indeed. Yeah, the windmill is fantastic, guys. If you can ever get there. If I ever regret being a vegan, it is the windmill, man. But I'm sure they have proper food as well. Okay, let me talk about Bloemfontein for you, because I know Bloemfontein a bit. I was at university there for 5, 6 years. And then I took care of my mom for another 8 years, so I know the place. And I do know that this place is as Afrikaans as this London is English. So
Yeah,
how were
very much.
you, you Sotis, how were you people treated there? I mean, how were the population against the boys in uniform?
No, the population was great as far as I was concerned. I mean, I remember we used to line up for church parade. And if you could get into one of the churches that had one of the cathedrals in town or something like that, those are the ones to go to, because the poor oaks in the end here used to have to go down to I think it was the Koeikamp and one side, and they would have in one of those big sheds there that have their church service there, and they'd have to. There was Afkak all the way there and Afkak all the way back, and the poor oaks, and we used to get driven off in the sawmills on a Sunday evening or whatever, and we would go to, it was the cathedral or wherever it was, and half the guys wouldn't actually go into the church service. They would hop back onto the sawmill, which would go down the hill, and as you come up near the center of Bloemfontein, there was the spur. We used to go into the spur. They had a porterhouse steak. Porterhouse steak and beer is lekker, but there were also girls there. And then again at the church service, there were also girls. And there's one thing about those Bloemfontein girls, they are pretty. Yeah, maybe maybe that's because we hadn't seen girls for a long time. But yeah, I tell you, it was quite a treat, quite a treat. No, we used to have great fun. We used to have great fun there, yeah.
No, they were great. I know at university, I think we really, it was a struggle to concentrate sometimes. Because they would arrive there, they would be all these plaasmeisies, and they were sort of innocent, mostly. I don't know how it is today. But the serious question about Bloemfontein here, Steve. The air is a lot thinner there than it would be in East London. And the place is absolutely extremely cold or extremely warm. Did that bother you guys? Because it certainly bothered me when I joined the police and they took us up to Pretoria for basic training from East London. It's the same as in the army. You just run your ass off all the time. That thin air got me. I mean, I knew I wasn't that unfit, and yet I struggled, for the first week or two.
Yeah, of course, big time. The East London has a lot of old age homes down there for a reason. It's one of the mildest climates in the world. And you go up to Bloem, and that very thin air, plus those days get hot as hell there. That got you. But cold, standing guard on Debrief, and I talk about in my book, dressing up in everything that you could possibly put on and wear, with your arpias over the top of it, with balaclavas, you name it. So much stuff on, and you would stand guard duty, but you had gloves on and stuff. Not that you had live ammunition with you out on Generaal de Wet. Yes, you couldn't even, if you had ammunition on, you couldn't even fit your finger through the trigger guard to fire a shot anyway. And I remember I write quite a funny story about looking like the Michelin Man, but a brown Michelin Man, like a big turd, and wandering around, and -6 degrees outside. That's excluding wind chill factor. Man, it was so fucking cold. I couldn't believe it. And I remember, when I got my relief, I say much to my relief came across and bumped into me from behind. I didn't even know he was there. And then I kind of mumbled something and wandered off. And then I tripped over the guy rope on one of the tent things. And I rolled around like a bloody tortoise on my back. I couldn't get up because I had so much stuff on. And I remember early in the mornings, the summer Yoris, you jog us around and go for 10K runs. And we had those thin army jerseys on over. And one thing, you try to stand to attention holding your rifle, but your rifle's frozen and it's almost sticking to your fingers. And often you used to hear these R4 clattered down on the ground because the guy didn't realize, but his fingers were literally frozen and they just fell down and hit the deck. And that would be a reason to have an oppie. You'd have a lekker opfok for that. But he said, no, it looks like you guys are too cold. So no one wants you to opwarm. And off you'd go for a 10K run. But what is crazy is you'd be running and ice would form on your shoulders because we were steaming. If you watch a rugby match on a cold day over in Europe somewhere, you see the scrum is steaming like that. Well, that's what we would. We were steaming, but you would actually, the sweat would come through and form blocks of ice on your shoulders. That's how cold it was. And those tents, those tents out in the veld there, those things were made for hot weather, not for cold weather. Shit used to freeze. Yeah.
Yeah, that place is dreadful. It's dreadful. A wonderful place to live, but both my parents are buried there. You mentioned there was this parabat who assisted you guys when you were standing in a queue and you wanted food, and there was these wankers who, couldn't understand life, and he sorted one out, which is fantastic, and we appreciate the paratroopers. But one SAI and one parachute battalion, were they ever chasing you guys around, or you them, or?
Yeah, there are often stories about that. I never had the pleasure, but I remember one stage there was a gym day or something like this, athletics day. Okay, so they decide, and this is just during basics, where everybody's like full of testosterone and we're all youngsters and what have you. And the crazy thing is, they sent us, so we all marched off, the whole of one side, the whole battalion, the whole of the Bats and the whole of SSB. We all marched off down to I think it was must have been the Varsity Sports Grounds, I think. And anyway, so there was big rivalry going on there and what have you, and a fight broke out. Man, I tell you, it was bad news. I think one guy lost an eye. A few oaks were like taken to hospital. I remember I think there were 4 ambulances pulled in there and had to take guys away. It was crazy. We were with, I had some of the oaks from the rougher side of Port Elizabeth with me there, and those oaks were only too listed to climb into a fight, and they were rough as a bear's bottom. I tell you, those oaks climbed in with wear belts and you name it. No, it was rough, but yeah, they were always, there was a lot of. That's one thing I did, was build up a lot of bravado and pride in your own units. Incredible pride in your own units, and. So obviously when when you bump into the Bats, there was always about to be a fight happening, and it was because if you could get back to base and you had a Parabat beret in your hand, the absolute hero. And it's the same thing, if they got back and they'd lost their beret, oh shit, they were in trouble, I think. Yes. No, it was good. It was good intercompany rivalry. But then again, when we were on the same battlefield, yes, we looked after each other. It's nothing, Koos. You talk about 3-2 is a classic example, and us pulling that guy out who was dying and what have you. That guy was black. He was black as the ace of spades. Our medic came from Noord-Transvaal. Sadly enough, he was probably a blooming Bulls supporter. Sorry, I had to throw that in. And this oak was trying his damnedest to keep this guy alive, and he was lying there covered in this guy's blood and what have you, but trying to keep him alive. One of my favorite movies is that Blood Diamond. And, there's that thing, what do they say? There's no apartheid in the foxholes. Well, 3-2 Battalion was a classic example of that, You're fighting on the same side. Didn't matter whether they were 101 fighting with you. You were, they were your markers, it's one of those things, So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because some of our Uitlanders were foreigners, and I know there's a lot who actually watch this show. I keep on saying to them, this was not about race. Not at all. This was about the Cold War, communism, capitalism, and fighting for your mates. And besides
Very
that, so the moment someone starts shooting at you, I assure you, all debate about what's wrong with life stops right there. And unless
Exactly.
you've been there, you won't understand what I just said to you. But can you remember who was your commander, your battle group commander? Must have been a commander.
I think it was Marais, if I'm correct. A major, I think it was Major Marais. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure. I think it was him. And yes, I think it was Marais, if I'm correct.
No, I was just curious about it. But tell me, the normal procedure when you see enemy aircraft, Victor, or what did we call him?
Fear, fear.
Yeah, Victor was our call.
Yeah.
What was the normal procedure? Would you always stop, with the dust go away and hide your vehicles and just wait it out? Because they can't stay very long. I mean, they don't have a fuel.
Yeah. So what would happen is we would usually get a heads up from the recce's who were obviously close to the airstrips, either at Quito or Manong. And they would tell us when the MiGs were taking off and they were flying what direction and they were coming towards us and what have you. And I'll get on to radar coverage just now. But yeah, as soon as we heard fear in the lucht, enemy aircraft approaching, we would what we call visgraat, which is, I think I call it in English probably herringbone or fishbone or whatever, where the vehicles would split up in opposite directions and they would head to the nearest tree. And obviously, Angola is not short of trees, but shit, as I say, and I repeat it quite a few times in the book, the way we managed to camouflage a 20 tons of armored vehicle in under 30 seconds was incredible. I tell you, those acts could never find us. And that was normally the idea. Now, as I was saying, the MiGs attacked us on a few occasions, but that was when we were already in battle formation and we decided that we were close enough to the enemy for them not to, have a bombing run at us. And that was the whole idea. And you talk about books on the border war. So if I can just bring in there that I think it was Dick Lord's book, From Fledgling to Eagle. Man, what an absolutely brilliant book. And just shows how good our pilots were. They start talking about, sorry, I can't remember, it was 42 Squadron or the squadron that kept that air bridge into Mavinga going every night. I mean, those acts were incredibly brave. Our Mirage pilots that would come in at low level and bomb through the thickest blooming anti-aircraft missiles systems and radars that you can see. I mean, they were unbelievable. Those guys, and I think in Dick Lord's book he explains pretty well how the further north we went, the less coverage we had on radars from our side. And our guys had about maybe a few minutes loiter time above the battle zone. And their guys, because their MiGs were taking off really close to the battle zone, they had about 40 minutes loitering time above the battle zone. Our guys had no time whatsoever. And they also had their radar operators in Quito, Carnival, and Manong guiding them into our aircraft, which they could pick up on their radar screen. So our guys were at an incredible disadvantage, but they still proved how good they were, incredibly good,
Yeah, we were. I just want to say quickly here that we also have an episode on the T-55 tank, which I made myself. So if you want to see what that beast looks like, and it's a damn beast, just look for it online at Legacy. And we also, as it happens, I'm not sure if these videos are out yet. We have F1AZ, that's a strike aircraft, the mud movers, they call them. Trevor Burnberg, we are speaking about that and how they would come in low and quick and fast. And so, it's fascinating to me how everything is just getting together. And I just want to say there might be people here we don't know about General Dick Lord. He's passed now as far as I know. Rest in peace, sir, if I'm correct. He was actually started off flying in the Royal Navy. And he was very heavily involved in the Top Gun concept. Where you have enemy aggressor squadrons flying against your people. So he actually wrote a manual on it. He was one of the team who did that. And then he came back to South Africa and he became a very, very good and famous officer in the Lugmacht and in the SAP. Now, on a lighter note, the one thing which General Tony Savidas is extremely proud about is this barbecue grill they built into a Ratel. There at the back, I think it's on the left side if you stand behind it, the right side if you stand in front of it. I see he's nodding here. When you
Yeah.
people were eating those green steaks, let's call them the old age steaks, were you still
Right.
using this barbecue grill or did they get lost, boonder bashing there through the trees?
Our one, I just remember using a spade, but some of the guys, what in the base of your rifle, you've actually got it's a mesh. It's a mesh so that you I don't know, stuff didn't drop maybe onto the floor and stuff. Anyway, these meshes would you could lift them out and use those. Those were often used as briar grids as well. But yes, I know exactly the one that Tony's talking about. I think if I remember correctly, it held some kind of equipment like spades or something on the side of the rifle. And yeah, that was definitely a brilliant South African ingenuity, shall we say? Because yeah, we used to. Geez, I tell you, if we could find something to braai, typical South Africans, we would braai it. It was
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. He was so proud. I think it's in episode 2, and he was pointing at this kiri thing, like a stick, but it's actually a small stick. And he was pointing at this, and he was like, "What's this, Koos?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, sir." And so it turned out they made it like a step where you could step on it to get into the vehicle. And I was thinking, why would these young lads need a step, man? I mean, they're 18, 19 years old. They don't need that. They're not like us
Yeah.
today. They have no fat on them whatsoever. And so it turned out they hit it like that. Oh, I forgot, the other last thing I'll say about East London is our chaplain, Colonel Andre Willifare, was actually the guy who disarmed the limpet mines at the Papa Jello restaurant, which was there, right?
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, they were planting. That's those states in South Africa, these freedom fighters were planting all sorts of bombs at bars and civilian places and so forth for
Yeah,
whatever reason. And
sure.
so he was one of them who actually disarmed it. But of course, as the special task force commander, he knew everything about it. Right.
Papagello's used to make the best Irish coffees, if I remember correctly.
Man, it was fantastic. I think it was there at the Orient Beach, isn't it? Just to the left
Yes.
or the north.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
On the
was down
beachfront,
there.
yes.
Yeah, it
Yes.
doesn't exist anymore, does it? I think it was blown up or something happened to it.
Uh, no, it was pretty grotty when we used to hang out there, and yeah, I think it's probably been demolished a long time ago. A lot
Yeah,
of a lot of our old hangouts have been.
yeah, that's true, man. That's true. Okay, guys, if you have stories about the Papagello, I would like to hear it as well as a windmill. I can tell you a very horrible story about. No, I won't. Let me rather not. Tell me about your book. I'm going to put the links in here. Must people contact you directly? Must they click on the link? What must they do, Steve, to get hold of this book of yours? And what's the cost? And remember, guys, the cost is as now. It might be more in the future.
Yeah, of course. The guys can get a hold of me. I think we'll put in the link. We'll put my email address, and the guys can get a hold of me directly. Yeah, the book's called Ratel 1-2, Armored Warfare in Angola. And yeah, as I say, I think the guys enjoy it. There's actually a piece at the back, believe it or not, where when I got back to the Deergangskamp, just inside Angola, I hadn't I hadn't written a diary as such, but I started sketching cartoons. So there's about a 6-page cartoon strip which I've added in there, which I've just done. I sketched things as we went through, things that certainly helped me in the book, remembering certain things that yeah, just reminded me of certain places, certain things that we'd seen, which is quite interesting. Yeah, so the guys have found that interesting. There's a heck of a lot of photos and pictures in the book too. So yeah, and I think the guys will really enjoy it. Yeah, I've had excellent feedback from, before I even started writing the book, I started jotting down just stuff that I remembered, and it was very therapeutic, shall I say, for me, just putting down these bits and pieces. And then I got onto that We Wore Brown's website, and I posted a few, and the guys said, "Whoa, that's pretty hectic stuff." And the guys thoroughly enjoyed the way I wrote, so I started putting more and more together on that website. And then the guy started saying to me, shit, it's time you wrote a book. You got to put this together and write a book. And wrote a book, and luckily enough was given a guy, if guys read books about the Rhodesian Fire Force, RLI, the Rhodesian Light Infantry, they would know a guy by the name of Chris Cox. Now, Chris ended up editing the book for me, and geez, what a great job he did too. And, it takes a person who's been through the same type of stuff that we've been through to understand, how to edit the book without changing the meaning or, as you come through. Some of the language is rough as a bear's bottom, as I say. But I mean, that's the way we used to speak. You could call a guy something extreme, and, it wasn't taken personally. That's just the way you used to speak to each other, wasn't it? If you do that now in Civvy Street, yes, guys will take extreme offense to that, but that's the way we spoke. And and I say in my book, I often say that, oh geez, I let it slip every now and again. You still let it slip in Civvy Street, and people think there's something wrong with you. No, that's just the way we were brought up to speak in the army. I mean, that's the way you did. You cut to the chase. You didn't call a spade wasn't a spade, it was a fucking shovel, type thing. That's one way of putting it. Yeah. The book, very therapeutic, I think. I think the guys enjoy it. Yes. A lot of humor. And then obviously, like what I spoke about now, some very serious stuff. But interesting. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, no, guys, you have to contact the man. But just tell me, what's the price? I forgot that people know before we
The
get
book
a
at the moment, the book at the moment is selling for $325. It must be because of my beautiful artwork in there. But that's the going price at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they just have to pay the postage, of course, extra. I mean, just there.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Okay, but when they email you, you can sort that out with it.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
that's not. Yeah, right here at the end, I have to say my cats are now mowing. They want food. I have to go and take care of them. Steve, this was fantastic. I thank you so much for contacting me. This was one of the great episodes as far as I'm concerned. And I wish you luck and all the best, mate. Thank you for your service and everything. And may I ask you at the end, guys, that we just bow our heads for 1 minute to think of the dead and the fallen. Normally, I would put in the last steps here, but sadly, I can't do that because of YouTube rules and nonsense like that. So let's just bow our heads and just go for 1 minute. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. If you've heard my cats meow in the background, I do apologize. I'm sure they would see the funny side of that as well. Steve, thank you so much. God bless until we meet again.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks again for putting this on and letting us, tell our stories, which a lot of people haven't heard about. And for us to be able to honor our mates who didn't make it back, and those that are still mentally fighting the war up there. This means a lot to us. Thank you, Chris. Do appreciate it. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.